Call to order the council meeting for Thursday, July the 12th. Roll call. All are present except, all are present. That was easy. No, I don't think so.
Everybody's here. Yeah.
That's right. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest by any member? Seeing none then. Approval of the minutes of the June 28th Regional Council meeting, moved by Councillor Raz, seconded by Councillor Shaughnessy. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Approval of the agenda. I have a motion moved by Councillor Paleschi, seconded by Councillor Medeiros, that item 7.2 listed on the July 12th, 2018 Regional Council agenda be withdrawn, and further that the agenda for the July 12th, 2018 Regional Council meeting be approved as amended, and further that there be a deputation from Adrian Woolley, President, Peel Regional Police Association, on item 16.1. Councillor Shaughnessy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I also want to just say that I'll be putting a notice of motion for the next agenda, so I'm just announcing it now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mayor Crombie.
Do we meet in September? We do?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, 7.2, you're asking to be withdrawn. Is that individual not coming forward?
That's correct.
They're not coming forward.
They've given notice, not to.
They've given notice.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't realize.
Not a problem. All those in favor then? Carried. Public announcements sponsored by a member of council. Don't see any. Consent agenda then. We'll start with items related to human services. 8.1. Held. Okay. 8.2. Consent. 8.3. Okay, got it. 8.4. 8.5. 8.6. Move to items related to enterprise programs and services. 10.1. 10.2. 10.3. 10.4. 10.5, 10.6, 10.7, 10.8, 10.9, 10.10, 10.11, 10.12, and there's no communications. Items related to public works, 12.1, 12.2, 12.3, 12.4, 12.5, 12.6, and 12.7, and 13.1 under communications. 13.2. Items related to health, we have 14.1, 14.2, 14.3, 14.4, 14.5, 14.6, and then communications, a lot of them from Brock. 15.1, 15.2, 15.3, 15.4, 15.5. And then 16.1 and 16.2, there's a deputation. And notice of motion, there's a deputation. So we'll hold those. All right, just need a motion.
Yeah, and it's recording.
Okay. Moved by Mayor Crombie, seconded by Councillor Downey, that the following matters listed on the July 12th, 2018 Regional Council agenda be approved under consent, those that were identified. and the rest will be held. All in favor, recorded vote, please. Oh, yeah, sorry. I'll do that before that. Okay. And that passes. Thank you. Just before we move into call on our first delegation, David just has an introduction he'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to introduce Council to Sean Baird, who is Peel's new Commissioner of Digital and Information Services. He comes to us with over 17 years of leadership experience in both private and public sector from across Canada. Most recently, he was Vice President at the Workplace Safety Insurance Board. And he's had experience leading transformational change in the digital space and optimizing service delivery, and I think will bring great value to us as we continue to modernize service delivery here in Peel. So welcome, Sean.
Good stuff. Yeah, welcome, Sean. Hopefully council will go easy on you today. All right. Our first delegation then is Ken Page, Chief Executive Officer, and Eric Durango, Vice President Operations, Contract Pharmaceuticals Limited, regarding the motion from Councillor Sato on the Peel Anaerobic Digestion Facility. If you'd like to come forward, and just remind you that you have 5 minutes.
Chair Dale, and through you to the other members of council, thank you for giving us this opportunity to meet with you. My name is Ken Page. I am the CEO of Contract Pharmaceuticals Limited in Mississauga, and my colleague Erica Durango is with me. She is the Vice President of Operations. She's been with the company 23 years, and I've been with the company 18 years. You're looking at a picture of a new tube line that we installed in our facility very recently. And I'll talk a little bit more about our investments as we go through our presentation. So we are here today to support a motion by Councillor Sato to reopen the matter of the organic garbage treatment and yard waste transfer station approved for a site on Danborough Crescent in Mississauga. The north wall of our building is about 5 meters from the proposed waste transfer and processing facility. So what I'd like to talk about today for just a couple of minutes is common sense and risk. But first, a little bit about CPL. So we were founded in 1991, and we've operated in Mississauga for most of those years. We're privately held by shareholders who passionately believe in our company and our future. And we make prescription products for human consumption for other pharma companies. In the industry, we're known as a contract manufacturing organization. Our customers include some local companies like GSK and Hoffmann-La Roche. And we're inspected by regulators from companies around the globe, countries like Canada, the United States, Europe, Russia, Korea, Japan. In addition to those countries, we also sell to customers in Australia and Mexico. In fact, about 85% of what we produce is for export. And we make products that it's very likely that you or your children or your friends or your family use. And while pharma manufacturing in Canada has somewhat declined, we continue to grow and invest. In the last 4 years, we've invested about $40 million, and we've invested in things like new state-of-the-art equipment, like the picture behind you, and we've invested in labs, and we've invested in offices that reflect the most current thinking on effective workplaces. Our investments have been financed in part by Export Development Corporation, as well as directly through the Government of Canada through a FedDev loan of $9 million. We have 400 employees providing jobs for people who have spent years in higher education. In the last 3 years, we've hired about 115 people who have some of them have stacked degrees, but of those 115 people, 12 hold a certificate of some sort, 14 have a diploma, 56 have a bachelor's degree, 22 hold a master's degree, and 12 of them are PhD doctors. But here's the big risk for CPL for the future. If the organic garbage treatment facility and yard waste transfer site is approved and proceeds, it will attract insects, rodents, and noxious odors, all of which are literally a death knell for a pharma manufacturing operation. Trucks waiting their turn to enter the station would be lined up right next to our facility on hot summer days like we've had for the last couple of weeks. And while they're waiting to enter the facility, they may be dripping liquid onto the roadways that abut our clean pharma facility, which makes it really a veritable garden of delight for the insects and rodents attracted to that waste. The lawn clippings entering your facility will surely be infested with persistent bugs that want to make it their way next door to our facility. Health Canada inspectors have a habit of entirely going around a facility to see what they can see, including going up on the roof. And when they do that, they will see what's going on next door at your facility. Their prying eyes, their inquisitive eyes will not be fooled. So the promises that I think were made to council originally about the facility, we are concerned with those promises about a clean operation. We won't know whether your promises will hold true until the day after your operations begin. It's not like test driving a Toyota, where you can go to the dealer, take the Camry for a test drive and say, yes, that meets our expectations. We don't get to test drive your facility until the day it opens. And by the time it opens, if there are pests and there are odors, it's too late for us. It would take us 3 to 4 years to actually move our facility if we actually had to.
You're approaching the 5 minutes, if you could just summarize.
So there are lots of risks for us. We've invested in this facility, $40 million over the last 5 years, but the risks are to our shareholders of losing all of their investment, risks to our employees of losing their jobs, risks to the city of Mississauga of not being able to continue with its important life science hub, risks to the city or to the region of Peel if in fact all of that were to come true. Lawsuits might actually start to develop. And so what we'd like to do today is to say that we understand that there is a report from staff that suggests taking another look at this project, reopening the matter on the motion of Councillor Sato. We're here to support that motion, and we're certainly happy to work with the staff and the councillors in trying to see how this project might proceed. Thank you for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Sato.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you for being here today, Ken. Could you just clarify or explain to members of council what occurred and what the impact was when you were explaining to us in our meeting of one tiny little insect getting into your building? Because I don't think, I was surprised at what the ramifications of that little tiny thing were.
So I will respond to the question. Thank you for asking. We had a situation last summer, as an example, where in one of our manufacturing suites, we identified the presence of very tiny, you could call them almost fruit fly size insects. And the investigation that ensued actually caused us to cease manufacturing in that room for about a 3-month period until we exhausted all of the possible sources of those insects in that room, because by regulatory requirements, we're clearly not authorized to produce under the presence of any sort of presence of insects or any other type of pests. So the idea of, again, having this facility next to us and the certainty that there are going to be insects present could certainly pose a huge risk to us in terms of our inability to produce. We are a third-party manufacturing facility, and none of our customers would look kindly on us breaching our contracts by not being able to produce.
Can you further clarify if Health Canada, and I know you mentioned that you get approval from other agencies, international agencies, American, European, et cetera, but what could be the ramification of Health Canada coming out and not giving you your certification? You kind of touched on it, but...
Well, so in the worst case scenario, they would tell us to stop producing. And they would say, you must fix the problem before you can continue to produce. And if you think about it from a logical, common sense perspective, would you want to have products that are pharmaceutical products for human consumption? Would you want to use those products if they were manufactured in a facility where there were insects present? The answer is clearly no. Yeah. And Health Canada is simply employing common sense. And so they would tell us, if you can't fix the problem, you can't produce. End of story.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, those are my questions, but I would ask that once the other speakers have asked their questions, I'd like to move forward the motions and the report and discuss them while the deputants are here at the council meeting.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councilor Sprovieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Page, for coming here today.
Thank you for having us.
I really like your opening sentence, common sense and risk. I've never heard anyone else use that before, but I want to keep that in mind because it's really.
Feel free to use it.
Yeah, thank you. So you haven't got a patent on it yet?
No, not yet. no.
Okay, thank you. You should, because it makes a lot of sense what you said. Can I ask, do you know what the zoning of where your plant is? If it's an M1, M4, M3, if it's general industrial or prestige industrial?
So I can't tell you that I've researched what the zoning is. However, what I can tell you is in a meeting that we had with your colleagues and some staff, we were told, I think, that the zoning is actually heavy industrial. And that might include the ability to have this kind of facility on the property. But my response to that would be, if somebody else, if the argument is anybody else could come and buy that piece of property and put that kind of facility there, and there's nothing you could do about it, that might well be true. But the fact of the matter is, there is nobody else who would put that kind of facility there except for a local municipality or a regional municipality, because who else has access to the raw ingredients for that processing facility, which is organic waste? And so whether it's zoned and somebody else could go in it is almost a bit of a red herring, because the only ones who would do it are people who are in elected positions and have the authority to make decisions regardless of what the zoning is.
And I understand that, and I just wanted to get that clarification because usually, your type of uses are pretty in more prestige industrial areas, but if you happen to be in a general industrial area, that's fine. But that doesn't mean to say that we should be putting this kind of use beside you. We want to keep you where you are. We don't want you moving away. We don't want
appreciate
to
that.
put you out of business. We don't want you to disrupt your
Councilor
business either.
Sprovieri, you're getting into
Yeah.
debate if you
So,
could.
no, I'm not debating. I just want to, the question is that I agree with the deputy.
The
that-
area where we're located, by the way, is locally referred to as Pill Hill, because there are several other pharma companies related to the industry in the same space.
And thank you very much, and I totally
Pleasure.
agree with you and support the motion from the councilor.
Thank you, we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Palashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming. You had mentioned the Minister of Health. Have they responded or provided any feedback as to what we're trying to do? Do they have a letter in opposition to us building a facility beside you?
I don't think I referred to the Ministry of Health. We've
You
not
said the
had-
Ministry of Health comes and
Oh,
they're going to
that-
be on your roof. They're
that
going
would
to
be
look next
Health
door.
Canada.
Health Canada,
Health
my
Canada,
apologies.
yeah.
Do
So-
they have
so-
a letter in opposition or to us building a facility beside you?
My guess is they're not aware of this. So there
And-
would be no letter of opposition it would make no sense for them to have a letter of opposition to something they're not aware of.
And you wouldn't contact them to get a comment from them?
We
You
would-
assume that they're going to be on your roof looking next door and have an issue with an AD system next door. So I would assume that you would contact them to get a comment?
We absolutely would do that if this project moved ahead.
Okay.
But at this point, our understanding is that it's still the motion is to reopen it and to reconsider it, through you, Mr. Chair, that the motion is to reopen it and reconsider it. So at this point, if it turns out that the circumstances are such that everybody is happy or that the project is terminated, there's no need for us to reach out. And in any case, typically what Health Canada would do is they come and inspect what we have. It would be, I think, a very unusual situation for them to issue any kind of letter of opposition to anything. That's not what they do. They come and they say, here's what we expect. Do you meet it or don't you? That's up to
So
you.
based on the staff report, and you've looked at the staff report? and you're-
Just very briefly, as we were sitting here, I've not actually had a copy of the staff report.
Okay, do you understand what the staff are saying to put a hold on go forward and re-looking at this issue?
In the 30
And you're-
seconds I looked at the report, yes, that was my understanding.
With that 30 seconds, you're in somewhat of support of that?
Yes.
Okay. How many AD facilities have you visited?
How many,
AD facilities have you visited?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the term. AD.
Anaerobic digestive systems?
None.
None? So I've visited a few, and I've never actually seen any bugs or smelt any odors. As chair of waste management, so the assumption that you know it's they go hand in hand, bugs and organics. But your assumption for those to migrate over to your facility, I think without actually knowing or understanding the facilities, I'm not sure why you wouldn't look into that a little bit further.
To you, Mr. Chair, exactly what we would agree with you in terms of the motion of Pat Sato, Councillor Sato, and the staff report, which is to reopen it. Well, let's have another look at this, because up until this point, we were fortunate that the councillor did have a meeting with us.
Sure.
And had some staff members, but that was after the project had already been given the green light by Peel Regional Council. So now we're in a situation where we need to have the motion to reopen the matter, take another look at it, go through a process that would evaluate it and give us the opportunity to weigh in. And so we're fully in support of that, and to say, we're not coming with closed minds, we're coming with a lack of full knowledge, and if we can gain the proper perspective and understanding of these kinds of projects, then it may be that we reach exactly the same conclusion.
Well, I think, and I guess I missed that part in your delegation, because really as soon as you had said that, you know, there was going to be a lawsuit, that's kind of where I kind of closed my ears to the fact that there was ever going to be any kind of opportunity to coexist. So thank you for saying that. Thank you for
Pleasure.
coming. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mayor Crombie.
Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
It was just a few months ago, I think, that Councillor Sato and Councillor Carlson hosted that roundtable for the Meadowville business community, where we had the opportunity to meet you and hear about this issue from your perspective. And boy, it sure enlightened us. We had no idea you were there. And I guess the staff didn't either. So I'm just wondering, how did the staff miss that there was such an important facility located next to the site? And there's been quite a bit of consultation done. I wonder if staff might speak to what kind of consultation was done and how they could have been missed.
Councillor Crombie, that's not really a question pertaining to the delegation. I would ask that you hold that until
Okay,
if
can
it's
I-
reopened.
Okay, then can I ask the delegate, please, were you aware of consultations that were ongoing with the stakeholders in the community that a possible anaerobic digestion facility might be opening up next to you? Because I know that there were community consultations and businesses were contacted. Did you have the opportunity to come forward and meet with the staff?
Through Chair Dale to Mayor Crombie, we were not aware of it, and we became aware of it almost by happenstance in a conversation I was having with the real estate person that we have a corporate relationship with, who mentioned that the site had been sold and this was the intended use of the site. And it was at that point that I became aware. Now, I was subsequently informed, I think certainly by Councillors Carlson and Sato, that
Carlson.
there was communication. If it was delivered to CPL, we missed it. And so when those meetings were held, we were not aware of it, and therefore, since we didn't know about it, we didn't attend.
Terrific. Okay. So that was really my only question. You know, the life sciences sector is such an important one for Mississauga. You know, we are the second largest life sciences cluster by employment in all of Canada, with 470 companies and 25,000 and more people employed. So this is critical for us. So I'm so delighted the staff will pause and relook at it, and I'm happy to second both of Councillor Sato's motions, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie.
All right. That's my list of questioners. Councillor Sato has asked to bring forward the motion first to reopen. Do I have that motion? Yeah. I have a motion moved by Councillor Sato, seconded by Mayor Crombie, that the matter of the Peel Anaerobic Digestion Facility to be located at 7500 Danbro Crescent in Mississauga, as in Resolution 2017-975, be reopened for discussion on July the 12th, 2018. to enable the ward council to share critical information. And this is a recorded vote, please, and requires 2/3. That passes. Then I guess we'll bring forward the report, which is 12.7, I believe. Councillor Sato?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have some questions of staff. I guess the deputants maybe could step down. And
Thank you.
If you'd like to move receipt of the delegation, then?
I'll move receipt of the
Okay,
delegation.
seconded by Mayor
Yeah.
Thompson. All in favor? Carried. Thanks so much.
I do have questions of staff, and it relates to some of the questions and comments that were just made. First of all, the city is looking at rezoning the properties such as this that were discovered in the Meadowville Business Park. It's old 1980s zoning. And there were a couple of parcels within the Meadowville Business Park, which is our prestige office and pharmaceutical business park in the city, that there were a couple of parcels that had an E219 zoning, which allowed a wide range of uses. And indeed, this is one of the uses that was permitted, which was quite a surprise to me. Rather than putting a holding zone on the property, which the city could do if we can't come to some resolution, staff are working on, over the next year, they are doing a full review of all the zoning in the Meadowville Business Park in order to make it more appropriate to be compatible with the existing uses, many of which are pharmaceutical and life sciences. So as far as staff is concerned, they looked at zoning, and when they came to me, I was not aware of the sensitive nature of the business next door. And I've been very supportive of, and I'm still willing to take an anaerobic digestion facility in my ward in the appropriate location. And Jeanette and I have spoken about this a lot. And we did hold public consultation. Unfortunately, the public consultation could not be held until after the region purchased the property. Because of the nature of the purchase, it was all confidential. And so I couldn't go to any of the businesses and say, this is what we're thinking of doing. Letters were sent out by the region, and it's very clear to me when I went to the open house, which I asked be held right there in the community, within walking distance of all the major buildings, that only 2 companies came out. And it was held at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 4:30 to 6. And what I heard from those 2 companies is that they heard, kind of through the grapevine, they did not receive the letter. Afterwards, I went and I spoke to a few other companies, and I've yet to find anyone who received the letter indicating that there was an open house. So unfortunately, the consultation was not effective. I don't know why the letters were not received, and I could understand if 1 or 2 businesses didn't open it or receive it, but I think we sent out 20 or 30 letters, and 25 to 28 of those companies said they didn't see it. So we have no answer for that. They were sent through Canada Post. I don't know what happened, whether they received them, didn't open them, but it was a letter from the region of Peel. So having said that, the consultation at that point was lacking. As I said, I did not know. I have thousands of businesses up in that business park. I don't know what every single one of them does. If I had, 20 or 30, then I would intimately know what they all do. But had I been aware, I'll tell you now, had I been aware of the sensitive nature, having received the information from Ken, of the use of the building, I wouldn't have been as quick to say, yes, I support it. But I didn't. So that's what happened. And I guess it shows you should never assume anything. It can really come back and bite you. When we first heard about this, and it has taken several months to get everyone together and all of the information, Jeanette was contacted by Ken initially, and she contacted me right away and told me that she had spoken with him. Then I was contacted by Ken when Councillor Carlson and I held our networking breakfast with the business community. Immediately, I held a meeting at the company with Region of Peel Waste staff. Norm was there, other staff were there, economic development staff from the city of Mississauga. And we discussed the mitigation. And I had been assured that there would be no trucks carrying organics parked for any length of time on the road. Because there are other businesses there that are not quite as sensitive, but they are still businesses that are operating. The land has been used for trucking, and I was also told that there would not be as many trucks going in as there were today. The trucking has been there for years. It's used for storage, but they don't hesitate on the road. They go directly in, so there's no queuing on the road. I spoke at the meeting and said, well, we can mitigate. Staff have told me we can mitigate all of this. There'll be no odors. There'll be no insects. The doors will be closed all the time. The doors will open, the truck goes in, the doors close. There's no open time other than that access. Following the meeting, Norm said to me outside the meeting, we cannot mitigate to that degree. So huge red flag went up for me as the ward councillor when I'm told we cannot mitigate to that degree. I've checked with our city transportation staff, our traffic staff, to see what we could do about preventing trucks from backing up on the roads, because it is a problem and it is a huge concern. And unfortunately, under the Highway Traffic Act, we can't, as long as they're idling. So we're going to have trucks idling, and that's the only legal way those trucks can be on the road. What we can do is put up many signs along the road, not allowing the trucks to block certain areas of the road. And apparently this was a situation that happened in other parts of the city. And so staff had been through this example. That would effectively, on this particular street, because there are multiple driveways, that would potentially effectively not allow any of the trucks to be on the road for any length of time other than to drive through and go directly into the building. But you cannot mitigate the doors of the building, apparently. A further red flag went up when I spoke with the city of Hamilton, who had just a couple of weeks ago announced that they had to shut down their anaerobic digestion facility, which is a slightly different facility, but also which they were assured that there would be no odors, no insects or anything. And they had to shut it down because of odor that was being reported from some distance from the plant itself. And they had no idea, when I spoke to their staff, they had no idea what the cause was. And they had never expected that this would happen. So as far as guarantees, obviously there are no guarantees, and that's the concern. I would have assumed, again, assuming, not a good thing, that staff would have checked what businesses were adjacent to the facility and within that distance. And as you see in the report, manufacturing pharmaceuticals is not considered a sensitive use. I think, as you've heard from Ken, it's a very sensitive situation. If you go into that building, and if you want to go on a tour of the building, you would have to wear a complete gown, hat, boots, mitts, everything, because of the risk of anything getting in, any contamination getting in. I certainly wouldn't want to use products if there was a risk of contamination. When I heard about the situation where they had to shut down for months, a huge part of their manufacturing process because of a tiny little fruit fly, that's how great the risk is. And they have systems to try and keep that out. So as far as their systems are concerned, their air exchange and their HVAC and everything else, they have mitigated to a point where that shouldn't happen, but it did happen. So the risk is there. The risk is there, and it's a very real risk. And I know Erica was dealing with that one for some time. Staff did advise, because I held a further meeting, and that meeting wasn't excuse me, we weren't able to hold the meeting until a couple of weeks ago in June, which is why this is coming at the last minute, because regional staff, with their schedules, we were not able to get regional staff together until about June 26th or 27th. So after we held that meeting with city staff and regional staff, that was when I was able to provide some information. At that point in time, I was waiting for the clerk and the region's lawyer to determine whether or not the discussion would be in camera or not. So I was being very cautious at not sharing, because sharing confidential information publicly is a big no-no. So I appreciate staff's report, and I thought you'd already hired the consultant, the health consultant. I thought you'd mentioned that you'd brought someone on board, Jeanette. But I am perfectly willing to move the staff recommendation, which is suspending the process at this point in time, have the consultant go out and take work. I appreciate, and I think Ken does as well, that he would be able to have input into that. And actually, since this, I've had two other companies, have come forward with similar concerns. Theirs are not quite as great concerns, but they are concerns. So we do need to know whether or not we can mitigate or not. There can't be any trucks parked on the road. I mean, that is one mitigation that has to take place. There can't be doors open. I mean, there's a lot of things that really need to be done before I would be satisfied that it would be mitigated to a degree of reducing impact to this type of an operation. So I will move, and hopefully Mayor Crombie would second the motion. This is very important to us. Our health sciences, our life sciences are very important, as the mayor said. And the viability of this company is extremely important, and over 400 jobs. And I don't want to lose those 400 jobs, and I don't want to lose someone. So one of the staff people said, well, how do we know that that this company won't move? They just spent $40 million on upgrades. I don't think they're going to be moving anywhere very quickly at all. You don't put $40 million in. And the only reason that they would have to move is if there was a huge risk of contamination.
Thank you. Councillor Parrish.
Well, I'll support Councillor Sato's motion. I'm just curious, one of the first locations that we looked at was in my ward on the corner of Dixie and Derry, which was a great location as far as access for all the trucks coming in. One of the difficulties, the only objection I had was because we've got a lot of truck traffic there already. But then I found out that it was rejected because the GTAA was worried about seagulls. Now, I've never heard anything more ridiculous in my life. The trucks come in covered. The facility itself is completely self-contained. There are no openings for seagulls to come in and affect airplanes. So what I don't understand is why a body like the GTAA can say, we're worried about seagulls, and we just pack our bags and go somewhere else. The farmer who owns that property has been trying to sell it for 20 years, and he was very keen to sell it to the region. And so if seagulls are a problem, I'm sure little bugs and germs are a bigger problem. So I will support this. I hope that we have a really good look at other appropriate locations if this doesn't work out, and go back and look at the corner of Dixie and Derry, which is a giant vacant farm that the man is desperate to sell. And it's at the very end of a runway, but I don't think it's going to attract seagulls.
Thank you. Councillor Innes.
Thank you. And just to follow on that, I think that we've been working with the GTAA with regards to that matter, and it is a mixed waste processing facility. It's not an anaerobic digestion, so that's a separate facility. But I want to thank Mr. Page for coming and for working with staff and for supporting staff's recommendation. I think that we all need to take a pause and thoroughly investigate before we make a decision so that we have all of the information. I know that last week when I had made that request, there were some not so happy faces around the table, but I want to say thank you to staff and most importantly to my colleagues for taking that chance to look at everything. We don't want to jeopardize the City of Mississauga's life sciences whatsoever. That's never our intention. And we also need to make sure that we're supporting our goals that we set around this table with our diversion targets, and anaerobic digestion is one of those ways of getting there. So I fully support the report in pausing the procurement and having another look at it and thoroughly investigating, making sure that we have all the information to make the best decision possible on behalf of our residents. So with that being said, I would like to move these staff recommendations.
They've actually been moved by Councillor Sato and
Oh, you guys did, already done. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Shaughnessy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a quick thought, because I heard what went wrong with the process is it was in camera, we couldn't say anything, therefore nobody could be part of the process of understanding what other sensitive issues were, or sensitive land uses were around it. I think if we're going to go back and look at it, we have to actually go back and look at it from also that perspective. How do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? That we decide on a piece of land, but then find out after the fact that we bought it, because we may not have bought the land if we had known the issues that were around it. So I'm just suggesting to staff that they also look at that process so we don't get caught in a second time. Thank you.
Right. I do have a motion before me then, moved by Councillor Sato, seconded by Mayor Crombie, that Peel retain consultants with expertise in relation to pharmaceutical manufacturing to investigate and advise respecting the concerns raised by Contract Pharmaceuticals Limited with the sitting of an anaerobic digestion facility at 7500 Danbro Crescent, Mississauga, including to undertake a risk assessment and an evaluation of measures available to address risks identified and report to Regional Council with the results. And further, that the retention of such consultants proceed by means of a direct negotiation process. And further, that the Regional Corporation enter into such agreements for purposes of the retention of the consultants as the Commissioner of Public Works deems necessary or advisable on business terms satisfactory to the Commissioner of Public Works and on legal terms satisfactory to the Regional Solicitor. And further, that Contract Pharmaceuticals Limited be invited to review the scope of work of the consultants and comment on reports prepared by the consultants. And further, that until Regional Council has had the opportunity to consider a report of the findings of the retained consultants, the request for proposals for the design, build, operation, and maintenance of the AD facility not be issued. And that's a recorded vote, please. And that passes. Councillor Sato?
Mr. Chairman, since we dealt with that, I'm going to withdraw my other motion.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's appropriate. Thank you. All right. That takes us to our next delegation, then Adrian Woolley. He's the president of Peel Regional Police Association, and it's regard to the Integrity Commissioner Report 16.1 and in relation to 16.2. Welcome, Adrian.
It's getting a little dry up there, sorry. Good morning, Chair Dale, and thank you very much, councillors, for allowing me to be here today. I won't be the 5 minutes. As the association president, I feel I must defend the character, hard work, dedication of every member of Peel Regional Police. That's sworn and civilian. While I'm also extremely disappointed that the Senior Officers Association is not here beside me speaking up, I have to call out Councillor Parrish with regards to her vile, racist, hateful comments that were directed at a Peel Regional Police officer. They were directed at a female officer who is a member of our visible minority community, and it just so happens that she happens to be the highest ranking female black officer in Canada. As an association, we are proud that the PSB and the service support plan to recruit women, more women, and certainly visible minorities to the Peel Police. This is a change, or Peel is a very much a changing community, and we must change with it. The Recruiting Bureau is trying very hard to endeavor to recruit more officers to obviously reflect this. This being said, as the president, I don't know really, what am I supposed to tell a first-year constable? What am I supposed to tell a first-year cadet or recruit that's a female black that has aspirations of being a senior officer, deputy chief? What do I tell them? If this council allows Carolyn to get away with this type of language, that every new officer that's in that category is going to feel that the only reason they were hired or the only reason they were promoted was because of the color of their skin or because of their gender. And that is absolutely wrong. What's even more concerning is that this venom comes from yet an elected official. Carolyn used derogatory language towards officers in the past and complains about Peel Police whenever she can, yet she begs for more officers in Malton every single time. Make no mistake, this is not simply a one-off comment. Carolyn has a history throughout her career of making inappropriate comments. She has also recently stated that officers could be replaced with dummies out of pay duty, and used language certainly unbecoming of an elected official for her entire career. I am asking each one of you to hold Carolyn accountable for her language in this Integrity Commission report and reinforce the support for frontline officers, which you've shown publicly and privately for so many years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor McFadden, would you like to move receipt of the deputation? Seconded by Councillor Mahoney. All those in favor then? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us to items related to human services. Ask that Councillor Medeiros chair this section, please.
Thank you, Chair Dale. Members of council, you have before you a report 8.1, funding for new supportive housing in Caledon. Are there any questions or comments? Mayor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I got to say, first of all, I want to thank both TRCA revitalizing the site, but also for Peel and working together with a number of groups to make this work and as a public-private membership, and I want to thank you for that. And I know Mayor Crombie and I were at Iceland for a kickoff for raising the roof to help fund for something like this. Our golf tournament's going that way. This definitely, we want to be an inclusive here at the Region of Peel, and especially for adults with disabilities, is one of those ones that are kind of lost. And I thank you for seeing the value in this site, but I hope there's more sites through Region of Peel that I'm asking for, that we keep following up to find, because there is a need everywhere, and I hope we can use this as a model going forward for everything else if we can look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. So there's, moved by Councillor Grove, seconded by Councillor Innes. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Oh, recorded vote. Okay, it has carried. And we go to item 8.3, refugee claimant use of Peel Region adult shelters. So I'll probably pass. Oh, sorry. Oh, Mayor Crombie?
Yes, this is on our motion that Mayor Jeffrey and I would like to bring forward. Over the past few weeks, you've listened to Mayor Tory express concern with Toronto's inability to support the influx of refugees and asylum seekers that have come into the shelter system in City of Toronto and throughout the GTA. They're exhausted, and so we have asked for a capacity study, which you see in the report. If we move that forward as well, please, Mr. Chair. So they're exhausted, as are we, to deal with this really unprecedented number of claimants who are arriving. After August 9th, there will be over 800 people, many of them children, most of them children, who require shelter in the city. And the city will no longer be able to use the dormitories that have been vacant, free because of the universities and colleges will be requiring those for their students once again as the curriculum is about to kick off, where they're currently being housed. So I know we're all compassionate. This is a human issue. Our cities are on the front lines of this crisis, and we think we have a moral obligation to provide shelter and assistance to those in need who want to start their lives here and contribute positively. These individuals are all skilled individuals, highly trained, and will be able to quickly assimilate and get jobs. And last week at the large urban mayors caucus meeting that Mayor Jeffrey is the chair. She convened a meeting. Mississauga, of course, is a member. And Mayor Tory asked us on the call to discuss the issue and for our assistance. And he asked us to identify any possible sites or facilities that could be repurposed as temporary housing, as well as connections to any employers for future job opportunities for these individuals. And of course, our staff have done so in the report, and we note that our systems are taxed as well and heavily in use. But we were asked for support, and so we have examined our capacity and put other potential temporary sites for facilitating opportunities and also help with providing seasonal and full-time employment. So we need to create a regional strategy across the GTA on and how we're going to address this ongoing and really increasing issue of refugee asylum claimants that are coming into Canada. We all know that the federal government is solely responsible for the issue of immigration, and we know the position of the new provincial government. But the federal government has indicated a willingness to provide funding to fully reimburse municipalities for the complete costs of providing accommodation services programming for the refugees and asylum claimants. So today's motion, I hope, is a step in the right direction. It does ask, and I know that Mayor Jeffrey would like to second it, it does ask for full compensation for any costs. And we need to begin the work with the City of Toronto and their staff to assist them in providing shelter space where we can and however it is available, and enable our Commissioner of Human Services to enter into any agreement with the federal government and other levels of government for the provision of these accommodations and services to the refugee asylum claimants, subject, of course, to availability in the region. So it's the right thing to do. I know you all feel the same way. Mayor Jeffrey and I do, and I know Mayor Thompson does, and we please encourage you to support this motion. We want to assist these individuals. We want to assist, do whatever we can to assist the City of Toronto in helping to integrate the new asylum seekers and refugees, and we have asked for full compensation from the federal government, and we know that there is a willingness at the federal government to compensate those municipalities for their costs.
Okay, thank you.
Comments?
Thank you, Mayor.
And I'd like to move the motion at the appropriate time, and I believe Mayor Jeffrey is seconding. Yes, thank you.
Yes, very well noted. Thank you. Mayor Jeffrey?
So I want to just reiterate a couple of things that Mayor Crombie spoke. She spoke well on this issue. We did have a call on Monday morning with the large urban mayors, which is 27 municipalities from across Ontario. And essentially, Mayor Tory did speak to us for about 20 minutes, outlining and scoping the challenge that the City of Toronto has been facing and continues to face, and the fact that I think it's an August 8th deadline that they have. Our CAOs from across Ontario are already talking, but the elected officials hadn't been, so we were just made aware of the gravity and the scope of the issue, and certainly it's a capacity issue. In this region, in Peel region, we don't have a lot of capacity. We are already stretched. As a high-growth part of Ontario, we don't have the flexibility to assist with this problem immediately, but it is important for us to work with other municipalities because, as you already know, municipalities do all the heavy lifting. We're on the ground and we're there solving problems. So I think what Mayor Tory was trying to do was have a repository for that information as it becomes available so that our staff can work together. So essentially, this motion is asking our staff to work with the City of Toronto and other municipalities to see how we can work together. There are municipalities who were on the phone call on Monday that do need seasonal labor. So they are not as in close proximity as we are, but they do have a need for employment. They do have full seasonal employment and full employment later on this year, and they're looking at how they can house. So there are municipalities that are interested, want to be helpful, see this as a benefit to their communities because they have challenges attracting the labor force that they need. So I'm very supportive of this issue. I'm supportive of the City of Toronto. I think that they have done yeoman's work, a lot of heavy lifting, managing this issue, but that challenge has been exacerbated by the close proximity of school starting and them having to make sure that the dormitories are freed up. So I'm very supportive of this motion. I see this as an opportunity for us to share information amongst regions and making sure that we are supportive of our neighbor. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Jeffrey. Before I go on to the other speakers, I wouldn't mind some comments by the Commissioner regarding our capacity.
Thank you very much. Through the chair. So just as an update to the report that you have in front of you, yes, we are challenged with our capacity. We are at, or in some cases, in overflow for some of our shelters. However, having said that, we have been working with our partner, the Salvation Army, this week, and we have been reaching out and sourcing vacant hotel and motel availability. And should council approve this motion today, we will follow up with the City of Toronto and not only talk about shelter space, but employment supports and Ontario Works and the other kinds of case management that we provide to all of our individuals who are homeless. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Sato?
Thank you. Yes, I want to thank both of the mayors for bringing this forward. It is very appropriate for us to be asking for the additional funding. I was just made aware a couple of days ago that Eden Food for Change, as you know, has a teaching kitchen, and they do training, and they do get some funding through, can't remember the organization that handles all of the refugee situations in the city, polycultural. They get some funding through that, but they did a full training of cooking skills to a large group. It was, I think it was about 20 people. And they have been training them through this program. And it was they're very excited because every single one of them got a job, which shows how well these types of training programs work. But funding for those programs is scarce. And just that one result of up to 20 people being hired, being trained, being hired, and able to go out into the workforce is huge. And that could be repeated over and over again. So I think it's very important that we push for this funding so that we can increase those kinds of training situations across the region, not just in one location, because there are other opportunities for similar types of training. But if the funding isn't there, it's not going to happen because the organizations that are doing the training, they can't afford to provide it free of charge. So I'm very supportive of your motion. I really appreciate you both bringing it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Sato. Councillor Sporberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too, I think it's a great initiative to help the people who are in desperate need. I just want to be sure that I heard the discussion between Prime Minister Trudeau and Premier Ford regarding this issue, and my understanding is that the feds were, I don't believe they were really eager to full fund the initiative, from what I heard. Maybe they've changed their mind now, and I hope they did. And but before we get into any kind of action, we want to make sure we have the proper agreement for full funding. As you know, we're already being shortchanged by the province on a lot of social service issues, and we don't want to be shortchanged by the feds either. So we want to make sure that the agreement's fully in place before we get into any kind of programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sparveri. Mayor Thompson?
Yes, I have a construction contractor in our area. He was a refugee, came as an immigrant from his country, and he has hired a number of refugees. And he said they're awesome. He said hardworking, wanting to give back already, and willing to learn our English language. He says, just a testimonial on, he said he has not had an issue with one. And he said he'd hire more if they were available. Seeing this motion, I totally agree, but I also do know when I put my AMO hat on, AMO and FCM, as Councillor Fonseca will know, we do have a pillar there that's working on those issues. So if we could share our position with AMO and probably FCM as well, I think would really tie nicely. Can we do that as direction, or do we need that as a motion? Yeah, I think it'd be really good. So we're just collaborating more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. Councillor Parrish?
Well, obviously, I support this, but one of the things that always kind of rubs me the wrong way is when we worry about the funding. I have visited Palestinian camps in Lebanon and Syria, and nobody in this room could live there for more than 30 seconds. The Shatila camp in Lebanon is an old hospital. And when I first went there, I didn't realize that's what it was. There were little narrow streets, and every family had one room, and there was a kitchen at the end of each street. Turns out they had converted an old hospital 69 years ago. And there are families, third-generation families living there, and the mental health of the people who live there is incredible. Those people don't get to escape and come over here. They're in jail. They will never leave Lebanon, Beirut. The same thing in Yarmouk in Syria. Syria was one of the most advanced countries I've ever visited. They treated the Palestinians like human beings. And the camps there were literally streets with apartments on them, and people there were allowed to go to the doctor. They were allowed to go to school. I'm not criticizing the countries because they were inundated with Palestinians after the smart people in the world decided Palestine didn't exist anymore. That problem will never be solved, but until you've been to some of those camps, you don't realize a small bowl of rice or a loaf of bread causes World War III on a floor sometimes. And the kids are being born that they can't go to the dentist, they can't go to school, they can't do any of these things. So when these people escape and come over here, A, we should do everything we can to house them. B, we should make sure they can get work and have some confidence in themselves they're going to live in a new country and survive. And C, we should stop worrying about the money. At some point, we've got enough money in our pockets to take care of more people than we're taking care of right now. And it's a real experience to go over there because there's nothing you can do to help them, but we can when they get over here. So I support this, but I think the mayors and John Tory should be getting together talking about building a fund to help these people and stop worrying about where the money's coming. The feds will give you as much as they can, and then they're going to say, no, we can't give you anymore. And maybe it's time for us to step up to the plate and put some money into this. It was an incredible experience. I went back 5 times, so I guess I didn't learn my lesson, but I couldn't help them. We sent ambulances over. We did all kinds of things. It's just a very sad part of the world, and we should stop worrying about the money.
Thank you, Councillor Parrish, for that testimonial and bringing, I guess, a human face to this issue. Councillor Sparveri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, I don't want to belabor, and I totally am sympathetic to what's happening in these countries. But we also have to keep in mind that there's a whole problem with the whole international community. The Americans are sending billions of dollars to the Israelis for arms so that they can keep bombing those Palestinians.
I'm not sure if we...
Instead of using those bombs money to help those Palestinians, that's where the problem is.
Yeah.
We can the world is full of the world is full of need. And I want to help, but we also have to keep in mind who's causing the problem.
Councillor Sparveri, I appreciate your passion and Thank you very much. We have a motion on the floor, ladies and gentlemen. Recorded vote is required, moved by Mayor Crombie and seconded by Mayor Jeffrey. Thank you, and back to you, Chair Dale.
Thank you. That takes us to items related to enterprise programs and services, and would ask Councillor Fonseca to chair this section, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 10.1 was on consent, so item 10.2 was held, triannual financial performance report, April 30th. Councillor Ross.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I guess my question is to Stephen. With respect to employment supports and the projected year-end surplus, I'm just wondering why there would be a 53% projected surplus based on what we've budgeted for.
Through the chair, I'm actually going to have Commissioner Sheehy speak to that one.
Okay, thanks.
Through the chair. So we had been doing quite some significant work at redesigning our employment services. That work was basically put on hold about a year ago as the province was coming forth with their own recommendations. To date, we haven't received those recommendations. So I guess I would say that significant change to that program had been put on hold.
So with, I guess, some of the uncertainty going forward with the provincial government, what happens to those funds? Do they just get put back into general revenues, or are they going to be put aside for employment services in the future?
So in some cases, if the funding isn't spent, it will be clawed back. But we are moving ahead with some other changes and some work on our caseload models to see internally how we can best spend the employment services funding.
Okay, so the funding mentioned, is that provincial, are those provincial funds that they were provided to us?
Yes, they are.
So they're earmarked for those specific services, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ross. This is a recommendation, so moved by Councillor Ross, seconded by Councillor Starr. Recorded vote, please. And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item held is 10.9, feasibility of the physical conversion of the pool area at Lincoln Alexander. Councillor Parrish.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to move receipt of the report, and I'd like to thank BTY and our staff for doing such a thorough job. I read the report from cover to cover, and apparently it wasn't even expensive because it's the second time we've looked at this process. When you look at the options considered, it's going to be very difficult to decide which of those options would work until we find out Part B of the motion, which was to go to all the groups that are being funded currently and see if they want to move into that locations. Then you can calculate how much space you're going to need. I know it's probably inexpensive to go with the full 2 stories. It's the best use of money. But if you don't have groups to fill those rooms, then it's a waste of money. So I want to thank everybody for what they've done. Our staff at Mississauga met with regional staff, and they're progressing well. So just the next steps are hopefully going to be carried out between now and September, is to look into those groups that want to move into the facility because they'll be carrying their weight or their rent money with them. And the second thing I think we have to look at, and staffs have agreed, is a lead agency to run it so that we can walk away from it at some point and it can be independent. So I'm just moving receipt today and hoping we progress over the summer on the rest of the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Parrish. Thank you, staff, for the report. This is for receipt, so moved by Councillor Parrish. It's just a show of hands. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Items related to Public Works, Councillor Starr, if you chair this section, please.
Okay, the first item is 12.1. I think that was withheld. Somebody wanted to speak to it? Councillor Pelleshi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to staff, and I can see that there's some concerns in here on, the funding, and it's gonna cost the region a significant amount of money to have this implemented. Two quick questions. One, it does say in here that it's going to be a subcommittee under the Growth Management Committee, and I kind of see this being a little bit different, and why not be able to amalgamate the Growth Management Committee and a Planning Committee instead of having the sub, so that they're not reporting to Growth, which then Growth is reporting to Region?
Through the chair, to clarify, one of the options, and again, we're still looking at this,
Yeah.
and we'll bring something back, is we looked at what's required now and what we've had in place. We've had a growth management committee, and so we were, of counselors. We were thinking it could be expanded to deal with not just growth, but the whole overall planning. The new legislation requires us to have an advisory committee that has community members on it. That's all they say, with at least one.
Yeah.
So there is options that you could take that committee of council and put a community member, one community member on it, but we're cognizant that we have 3 municipalities, so really should it be 3? So one thing we envisioned is expand the mandate of the growth committee, and it really is a decision-making, because it's all councillors that reports up through council, but we could have a separate planning advisory that has members of the public who provide advice to that committee, but
Okay.
don't have a decision-making. So that's one option. We're kind of, every municipality is trying to figure this out, so we're having some conversations with them and seeing if there's some lessons learned from their thinking. And we'll bring back either a recommendation or a couple of options to the new council, but that's how we are envisioning it right now.
Okay, so just to confirm, one of the thoughts are you would have a whole separate community-led advisory committee advising the growth/planning committee. No council member would sit on that. It's just kind of, that's the way we would try and get public engagement into the committee.
That's one of the options.
Okay.
We'd look at the terms of reference to see whether it would make sense to have someone from the Growth Management Planning Council Committee, maybe chair it, like some of those types of options. We really haven't gotten down to that level of detail yet.
Okay. I guess, I really wanted this to be able to come to this term of council, not necessarily, everything, but maybe at least the terms of reference and the composition to come to this, just to set that stage for that next term of council. If there was an opportunity, is there anything you could bring? I know we have one more meeting left before the end of this term, I believe, September,
Yeah.
right? Is there a possibility that you could bring something back, just so this council can drive the direction to help out that next term of council?
Through the chair, if it's council's wish, we can definitely go back, flesh this out a bit more, and bring back those terms of reference on the September 13th council meeting.
I would request that only because I think that, this is something that it obviously it needs to be implemented, and I feel strongly that, we need to kind of set that groundwork, set that stage for that next term of council, because I know with the number of issues here, not issues, but the proposed the necessary work that needs to be completed, it's a lot of work. So and I also recommend the opportunity for all the municipalities, the lower tiers, to be a big part in this as well. Because, the lower tiers are where kind of those, even though here at the region we have that, the regional planning, but the lower tiers is where, kind of all the, I see here a lot of heads down. So I would support that. If it's a motion that needs to be put forward, I'm okay with that. But I also support involving the lower tiers in this. And maybe even the composition, having the chairs from planning sit on it, and maybe even the commissioners from the municipalities also be a part of it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Palashi, you're suggesting a motion
I am.
and a seconder?
Mr. Thompson, Mayor Thompson.
Okay, good. Okay, next on the list is Councilor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Am I speaking to the motion or am I speaking to the report? So I don't know if there's a motion on the floor. I don't know procedure here.
Speaking to the motion, the report was for information. So you're speaking to the motion.
Okay, I don't have a motion in front of me, but I'm going to try. I think I heard what Councillor Palashi suggested, and I think it's a good suggestion to have the lower tier municipalities participate in this. But the question that I have is with respect to the composition of the advisory committee with the member of the public. And so when well, I'm going into the report now. Yeah, because I'm a little bit unclear, and is it one member of the public from each municipality? Those are the things that I'm unclear about, so I think it would be great to have that information back in September when we meet again. And how do you choose those individuals? And I'm going to tell you, it's a big conundrum over there in Caledon with growth, and so I just want to make sure the composition of that committee is balanced. I'm looking for balance on that advisory committee, so I will look forward to the information coming back at our September meeting, and hopefully we will have a well-balanced committee, because having one member from a municipality concerns me, because it doesn't give you that diverse sort of representation. Thank you.
I didn't know. Are you finished?
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, thank you.
You were, it looked like you were doing something. I thought there was something else. Okay,
Yeah,
Councilor
no, thank
Shaughnessy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I too support Councillor Palashi's motion, but I think it has to be, what we have to bring forward has to be very strategic, in that when this first came forward, we weren't sure whether it was going to be a planning committee at the local level or at the higher level. It's come back as being a planning committee at the higher level. We're all very different here at the Region of Peel, Caledon, Brampton, Mississauga, and I don't pretend to understand all their planning issues, and I know they have trouble understanding our planning issues. I know at the town of Caledon, I have, had this term of council, many residents advocating for our own planning committee. And I would strongly suggest, and maybe you have a planning committee made up of residents. To me, I only see this working is if we actually have a planning committee at the local level, which then can be a collective voice, which then brings the information to the higher level. Because we are so different. And I echo Councillor Grove's concern about one person. Well, one person isn't necessarily going to be there to represent the needs of everybody. So I think I would like you to, in your review of this and coming back, I would like to see whether you believe a recommendation should be that each local municipality have a planning committee that therefore creates the collective voice that moves up the chain of command, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Just want to put it there. Thank you very much.
Councilor Palashi.
Thank you, and obviously there's a lot of good questions and questions that need to be asked, and that's essentially why I've asked for it to come back in September, so that we can put our heads together, ask those questions, and kind of set the stage. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Excuse me. We have a motion by Councilor Palashi, seconded by Councilor Crombie. It's a recorded vote.
Me.
Oh.
Sorry, it's recorded vote.
Recorded vote. And the motion passes. Next on the agenda is 12.5, which is the new utility payment portal. It's here for information. Councilor Rass.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jeanette. I'm very happy to see this. I'm just wondering, with the new billing system, when is there going to be an opportunity to sign up for equal billing or pre-authorized payments? Certainly, equal billing allows customers to pay an equal amount throughout the course of the year, which allows for better budgeting. So I'm just wondering, were those functionality pieces built into our customer billing system?
Through the chair, this new billing platform will allow us to explore a whole lot of things. You know, there's policy issues around, do we allow credit cards or not for payment, equal billing, all that. So we'll be looking at all of that and the implications of that. Some of it could mean changes to our user fee bylaw, et cetera. So we'll take that under consideration and explore the feasibility of doing that. It certainly will also give us a platform of doing more regular billing and alerts, which we know people want as well, combined with us moving to radio frequency. So instead of having someone reading the meter every so often, we're moving to new radio frequency, so someone just drives down the road and can take the reading, and so it'll provide more timely information for people if there is some change in their billing. So the combination of things is going to be pretty revolutionary for our clients.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Happy to move the report, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no one else on the board, moved by Councillor Rass, seconded by Councillor Moore. All those in favor, I think passed. Next item is 12.6, is the coordination of the water and wastewater infrastructure works with the Ontario Ministry of Transportation. Councillor Sato.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm trying to find it here. I had asked staff for a little bit more detail on this as to which lands might be impacted, where the pipes ran. And my understanding is that, you don't have a lot of detail right now, but my understanding is that the pipes are running both parallel to the highway as well as under the highway. I guess part of my concern is the cost sharing with the province, and it's basically just a comment, I think, on the cost sharing. This is a provincial project. I would expect that when you do the negotiations with the province, that the bulk of the cost would not be borne by the taxpayers of Peel. We would not normally need to be moving those pipes, correct? Or would we?
Yeah, there may need be strategic upsizing of the pipes at some point, but certainly what's triggering it. And my understanding, I'm going to get Andrew to come up and publicly correct me if I'm wrong, is that anything that has to be moved because it needs to be protected or changed because of the 401 widening, they're paying for that 100%.
Oh, okay.
There is some factoring in of life cycle. So, because we were going to, some of it would need to be replaced.
Right. Okay.
So if it's, we're going in and it makes sense to replace it
Right.
now because in 10 years we were going to, we would pay some share of that because we were going to have to replace
Right.
it. But if we're replacing it and losing some of that life cycle, they would compensate us for that. He's nodding. And then the last piece is, if we do some strategic upsizing, the cost of that upsizing is borne by us.
Okay, I guess my other question then, and Andrew, is that correct? You're
Yes.
nodding your head?
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
He's not going to correct you then.
No, I have always told them they
I
should
know,
correct me
I know.
if I'm wrong.
I guess my other question is, are these pipes on private land, on MTO land? I mean, we should know where our pipes are. Or are they on public land, private land, or MTO land?
Yes. So through the chair, it's a mix of all three. Some of them are
Right.
running in easements through industrial areas, some of them are in easements in MTO lands like parallel to the highway, and some are in license agreements as they cross the highway. So
Okay.
as we work out pipe by pipe, all 9 of them, I believe, Whether we're moving them, whether we're just protecting them, we will have to work with the impacted property owners. Some will get property back because we're not there anymore. Others will have to work out easements either through new properties or change where the easements are on existing properties.
Okay. I guess the one that I'm the most concerned about is my working farm on 10th Line. And they have already lost a significant amount of land to the 407. They're going to be impacted further by the 401 expansion. And it is a working farm. And this work is going to have a huge impact on the livestock that is on that particular farm. So I would ask you to be extremely careful if it has to be on their property. It is a heritage property, and we've gone through in the past issues with both the 407 and with MTO with regard to disturbing the water table on the lands and other disturbances that could both impact the heritage property and the heritage landscape that is there, as well as disrupting their business. So that was my big concern that arose, and the owners have raised these concerns with MTO, of course, at all of the public sessions. So, thank you.
Okay, I'll just add, point taken, and that's why we want to do as much of the work ourselves rather than having
right.
MTO do it, because
Oh,
we're
I
pretty
appreciate
sensitive
that.
to the community.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it does make sense that if MTO if we're required to do this, that at the same time, we look at the life cycle of the pipes and we upgrade, and let's get as much of it paid for by MTO as we possibly can. So really squeeze that money out of them. Thank you. I'll move the recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, seeing no one else on the board, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. It's a recorded vote. Motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Takes us to items related to health. Councillor Moore, if you chair this section, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Members of Council, the first item is 14.1, the Paramedic Services 2019 Response Time Framework, and I have Councillor Shaughnessy.
Thank you very much. Well, there's been a lot of action in Caledon this past week, having to do with paramedic services, making the front page of Metroland's newspaper, etc. today. There are many concerns that I'd like to start to address here and have some direction moving forward. The concerns that my Caledon residents have expressed is with Health Analytical back in 2006. There was a reference made, I'm sorry, people, I'm just really sick here, that there needed to be a difference.
Should we call a paramedic?
That there needs to be a different strategy between the rural areas and the urban areas, and I'm not sure if that's been captured moving forward. Also, understanding that in 2006 you had a new council, that information, making big decisions moving forward, is difficult on that new council, so I'm not blaming them. But what I've had come out in the last week or so with the Caledon residents is that they've said they're 5% of the population. So their concern is, what are Caledon's response times? So when you take all the numbers and you put them into one big pool, if you're only 5% of the population, those numbers maybe don't truly reflect what is happening in Caledon right now. And at the same time, Caledon's about 56% of the landmass, so it does need a different strategy. So we've been asked, I know Councillor Groves has been inundated along with myself, on what are Caledon's response times and the deployment plan, and then also how we identifying the issues moving forward that are more reflect, maybe I'm saying this wrong. Brampton and Mississauga are already in this new process. Caledon was supposed to be coming in at the beginning of January. How were the issues identified in the health analytics? How has that been addressed in the new plan moving forward for paramedics? Because we're not all the same. And I think we have to recognize that. So if health analytics was saying Caledon needed a different strategy, why are we putting Caledon into the same strategy that we're using for Brampton and Mississauga? So I see Councillor Groves is also on here. So I think what we would like to do is do some type of direction to staff to come back with that information. But I'll let Councillor Groves speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Groves, and then I'll look to see whether staff are in any position to respond to any of these comments today.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. And just following on Councillor Shaughnessy's comments, I did have a question through you probably to the Commissioner with regards to the deployment, because I know that that's a question that residents have raised. We understand the response time through the CTAS, but it's the actual deployment time. So I guess it was when the call goes to the dispatch and then they're deployed, and that we know the response times. And I know that we have been working very hard over the years to make sure that our response times are where they should be. And I think we are, and I think we're above the provincial average, if I'm not mistaken. But so can you tell me that through you to the, or
Commissioner Polsinelli, are you in a position to provide some information?
So through you, Madam Chair, I just want to be clear of the question. Are you asking Councillor Groves about the deployment, the timing of deployment? Okay, so I'm going to look to Peter, who works on that, to see if he's prepared to answer that question today, okay?
okay, thank you.
Peter, do you want to come down?
Okay.
So through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Groves, if you're speaking to the deployment plan start and end times, we staff based on the demand curves of the community. So we're not a stagnant 24/7 line of staffing waiting for the call. We follow the chart, sorry for the finger diagrams, but I can't. But it ebbs and flows with peak demand happening anywhere between 10 in the morning to 10 at night. So we reduce staffing through the early morning hours and increase a lot of staffing during those peak demand times. So shift schedules start anywhere starting at 5:30 in the morning for paramedics in the 24/7 system. And currently, we have a number of staggered peak time starts throughout the morning into the afternoon, with the latest peak car starting at 1 o'clock, I believe. So we staff all those trucks to meet the demand of the community, and we're a very fluid system. So we don't sit fixed in a facility, much like my partners behind me in police, out in the community, mobile, responding to incidents. We transport, police transport a lot to hospital through their mental health piece as well, but we transport to hospital when paramedics are cleared, then they're reassigned back out into the community. They may not go back to that same facility that they were originally at, but another vehicle would be replacing it through the ebbs and flows of the deployment strategy.
Right, thank you. And so the concern that the community has in moving to the new strategy in January is that there wouldn't be sufficient coverage. So because they're going to this reporting station in Brampton, and then they're coming back to Bolton, let's say, and the concern that they have is that there would be no coverage. So a call comes in, the one guy's going out to Brampton, to the dispatch, or to the center, the reporting station, and we're left without coverage. So can you clarify that? Because I think that needs to be clarified, that
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'll try to draw an example of this. So we'll have a morning shift start of paramedics out of our Fern Forest Station just up the street here at 1600 Bouvard at 5:30 in the morning. Our new deployment strategy that we're actually going to be bringing into place on the deployment side later on in this summer, in January, when those people or the shift lines are reporting in at the Fern Forest site, they would be deployed to either Calden Village or Bolton. We have 2 trucks that deploy at 5:30 in the morning, and both of those will be assigned to Calden Village and Bolton, and move out in that direction. We would already have night shift cars in Calden Village and Bolton who would be coming off shift at a later time. So in the new strategy that will commence in January, and we're still finalizing this with our union partners through our deployment working group, we'll have shifts starting at 5:30, 6 o'clock, 6:30, 7, and 7:30. So you could have a 7 or a 7:30 night shift still up in Calden Village and Bolton. When they're midway there, they get relieved, the other truck's going up, they tend to pass each other, and they'll be back on time to end shift. That is how the model is supposed to work. In the perfect world, that's how it's supposed to work. I can't account for what's coming into the system at the time. We could have a perfectly quiet day and everything gets deployed out in a beautiful fashion. I may have 10 or 11 calls going on at the same time, and everybody's going to it. So, but that's how it's planning to be able to shift it, working with our third party being the Provincial Dispatch Center, because we don't deploy the resource, the dispatch center does. We give them the plan and we expect them to do that.
Okay, thank you. And I support the direction that Councillor Shaughnessy has given, and I look forward to that, some of that information coming back, because I think that what our community needs, and all of us in Caledon, we've been inundated with this stuff over on social media. We're looking for assurances that our residents will not be left without coverage, or that they're going to be waiting 30 minutes for an ambulance to get to them. And I know that the region, paramedics has been really good in responding. I mean, I was on my way to the hospital a few months ago, and paramedic was telling me all this stuff in the ambulance. And so we want to just make sure that they're clear and our residents have that assurances that they're not going to be left without coverage in the new system. So the other thing that I think it's important to point out, and we've been dealing with this issue for years and years, Peter, and I know that yourselves and other chiefs have gotten together with the province of Ontario, is the offloading issue. It has gotten better, and I know the report states that, but I think that plays a real, that becomes a challenge for us overall. And not just for us here in Peel region, but really for every region that's dealing with this, that you have paramedics sitting at the hospitals waiting with you until somebody gets to you. So I think that it's important to note that, and for the public to know that, and that's out of our control. It's completely out of our hands. And now we have a new minister of health and long-term care, and I believe she was the critic at one point for healthcare, and then she was the ombudsman for healthcare in Ontario. And I think that this is something that needs to be addressed with her, so that the system changes, because a lot of what we do relies on what they give us. So I would ask that, we start advocating with her to make sure that these sorts of things change, so that we can have really, really good response time. So I had some other things, but you know what, I can always speak to Peter offline, and I'll look forward to when you come back to us in September with some of the direction that Councillor Shaughnessy gave. So thank you. And I do support having the additional 2 ambulances. I know that it's an impact in the budget, but I think that, first responders, whether it's paramedics, fire, or police, it's not something you want to fool around with, it's not something you want to cut, because those are the guys that save us in a real emergency situation. So I fully support having the additional 2 ambulances, because if it's going to make things work better, then absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Crombie.
I'm on a new issue, so maybe I'll allow
Okay.
Shaughnessy.
Thank you. Councillor Shaughnessy.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I think we all understand that our bordering municipalities, we all have this wonderful relationship where we help each other out. Toronto comes to when we need them, York comes, Wellington, Dufferin-Wellington comes when we need them. I get that. But what I'm hearing from the residents is those outside agents or those outside groups seem to be coming to Caledon's aid more than our own ambulances are coming to our aid. My only personal knowledge is that I've had to call an ambulance 3 times for my mom since February. One was the ambulance from Caledon Village, one came from Mississauga, and the other one came from Dufferin. Anyways, so they're all over the place, and I understand the fluidity. But if Caledon is getting covered off more often by our municipality, I think our residents would appreciate knowing that as well. So if we could cover that off in the direction, I'm not asking you now, I'm just saying, the deployment plan, the understanding all the, what is it, the CTAS, is that, I don't have it in front of me right now, for all those same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just the way we did in this report for all of the region, my residents would appreciate seeing that. Great? Good?
So,
Perfect.
just so that I'm
Yes.
clear,
Yes.
and I hope the commissioner's clear on what the ask is, because
Yes.
I'm not
We
really
did talk
clear
about
on what the ask that you're asking staff.
Okay.
What directions specifically do you want them to report back on? And actually, I see CAO wishes to
Yeah.
comment.
Yep. Ooh.
Thank you. Is it safe to speak?
Yep.
I mean, specifically, not just generally.
All those in favor of David speaking? Recorded vote.
The direction that I'm hearing from the councillors is that staff report back on statistics specific to Caledon related to deployment, to the use of, to service being provided by other municipalities rather than by Peel. What's the incidence of that?
Yeah.
And just generally about ambulance response time and
Yes,
deployment in
that's it.
Caledon. Is that it?
Okay. Staff clear on that?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that need to be a formal motion, Madam Clerk?
Yes, it's a motion for direction that is a recorded vote.
Okay, that staff report back on just what David said. All those in favor? And that's carried, and now we need a motion on the main recorded vote on the approval of the staff report. But Mayor Crombie, is your question on this report? No. Okay. So all those in favor of the recommendation in the report 14.1, recorded vote?
Just need a mover and a seconder as well.
Councillor Gibson and Mayor Jeffrey? And that's carried. Mayor Crombie, are we moving to the next report for your question, or do you have a general question?
It's actually just general kudos.
General kudos.
Chief Dundas, so yesterday in Mississauga Celebration Square, we had a 24-hour CPR-a-thon, and I don't know how you did that through the England-Croatia game, but God bless. A lot of excitement in the square yesterday. And then a couple of the councillors, Starr, Cook, Fonseca, and I came out last night at the conclusion of the 24 hours, and it was terrific. I think you had 100 teams out there practicing CPR, doing life-saving skills for our residents, and I just wanted to thank you, just acknowledge what you did, and it was a great effort on behalf of all the paramedics. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mayor Crombie. The next item is 14.2. It's a report on diabetes in Peel. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, staff, for this report. And, you know, I've always been one about going on about diabetes, and certainly you can see in this report the increase in diabetes, but I want to thank you, Dr. Hopkins, and your staff for taking the proactive approach and using the whole preventative measures, because my mother is a diabetic, and I'm going to tell you something, and I will sound like a broken record. Diabetes is one of those silent killers, and I don't think that there's enough attention paid to diabetes. It affects every organ in your body. It slowly kills you. And so, and I guess because of the environment that we live in today, we're always running around like crazy people from here to there and doing all sorts of crazy things because that's the demand on us. You don't have time to eat properly. You don't have time to really have good nutrition. And that's a big factor in the whole, I think. I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor, but I would think that that's a contributing factor. You know, we did a childhood obesity report here a few years ago, and I'm guessing that that's also a factor and something that we should be concerned about. And it goes back to healthy eating, and because there's just not enough time to do proper meals, and I'm one of them that I don't have time to cook meals. I pick up a lot, you know. So thank you. I just want to say thank you that you are taking the preventative approach into dealing with this very serious issue. It's a huge cost on the healthcare system. Don't know what the province is doing about it, but here I think there's an opportunity again to look at maybe asking for some more funding to either raise awareness or maybe having more services for those folks who are suffering from diabetes, and so that the prevention piece is key. And I always say an ounce of prevention it's better than a pound of cure. So maybe we can get some more funding from the province to work on the preventative side of this. So thank you again, Dr. Hopkins.
Thank you, Councillor Groves. Councillor Sprovieri.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, I've spoken on this before, and I'm looking for solutions to try to curb the increase, especially here in my ward, in Ward 9 and 10, that probably has the highest concentration of South Asian people, and that's the people who tend to have the highest levels. Now, I've been told that people from south of India have the highest level of diabetes in India and here in Canada. And the reason that I'm told, the reason is because they eat rice 3 times a day. Rice is their staple. Just like Italians, we have bread. Indian people, they have rice. And the people I've spoken to, they believe that because there's so much consumption of starch, is one of the reasons why there's such a high degree of diabetes. Now, I can speak from experience. My brother has diabetes, and my mother, who's still living and is a big pasta cooker, she likes the pasta. He's been told by the doctor, don't eat pasta, because pasta is a problem, starch. So I like the approach that you're having here about educating, using education as a means of trying to control the problem in childcare centers, schools, workplaces, and the community. But I'd like to know exactly what are we doing to reach out to the people, the public, the people that, and we know sugar is also a huge factor in diabetes. And we know that you go to every plaza in Ward 9 and 10 and other parts where there's South Asians, and there's these blocks of sugar sweet stores, and people buy them by the boxes, and people bring them home, and the kids eat them, and the parents eat them, and it's just it's really, to me, when I see that, Like, I wouldn't even touch one of those pieces when it's offered to me because I know how bad it can be. And I always try to inform people that you shouldn't be eating this sugar. So what are we doing? What can we do to reach out to the community and really try to educate that they should be really cutting down on the sugar, they should really be cutting down on the starch in order to, get a handle on this problem?
I knew there was a question in all of that.
There always is.
Dr. Hopkins?
Yes, through the chair, thank you so much for the question. As has been identified by both you, Councillor Sprovieri and Councillor Groves, healthy nutrition and healthy eating is really important to the prevention of diabetes, and you've certainly outlined some of the factors that contribute to that. In terms of your specific question about the work that Peel Public Health does to support the South Asian community in particular, we have an excellent partnership that is currently happening with the Central West LHIN, the hospitals, so William Osler, the school boards, and other partners known as the Healthy Communities Initiative. And one of the areas that we are actually working on is with one of the gurdwaras to work on healthy menu labeling within their cafeteria, as well as shifting to healthier foods. This is, as you can appreciate, a big change for some people in terms of changing their diets. So it does take time, but in terms of getting in at young ages, so the child care centers and ensuring that healthy food is available in child care centers, working with the school boards as well to ensure that children learn about healthy eating and how to eat right to avoid diseases like diabetes. Those are all different aspects that we contribute to, but the South Asian community is involved in the work that we're doing in order to address specific cultural aspects.
Well, through the chair, I'm really happy to hear that, and I do agree that targeting the schools is probably the best strategy because children tend to really listen. I know I have a 4-year-old granddaughter, and she's telling me what to do already. So,
And do you listen?
Yeah, this morning she told me, go to work. No. As I'm going. So, she wanted to be with grandma by herself, didn't want no around. So I went, I came to work. So thank you for that, doctor, and I hope that we really focus on the schools and the children because they're the best, I think the best strategy to really get a handle on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Would you like to move receipt of the report? Councillor Sprovieri, thank you. Seconded by Councillor McFadden, all in favor? Do we need a recorded vote on that? No. Thank you. And finally, the final report that we've held in health is 14.3, review of the Region Appeal Project Lifesaver Program. Is here with a recommendation. Mayor Thompson.
Yes, I just need to get assurance from staff. It's a good report. I understand that, progress is moving forward. It's served extremely well. I just want to make sure with the 2-year study and trying to find solutions that there's no gap in the process because there's a lot of people that rely on the Lifesaver program. And I just want assurances that we have something in place and our most vulnerable are being cared for.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Absolutely, Mayor Thompson. We certainly will do that as part of our evaluation process for those 2 years. It is about ensuring the program grows in the community with advanced technology, and we look forward to bringing a report back to Council at the end of that evaluation to give an update.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to move the recommendation in the
Absolutely.
report? Seconded by Councillor Groves. All those in favor? Yeah, recorded vote. And that carries. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. This takes us to other business then, the report from Principals Integrity. Councillor Parrish.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, I would like to speak before anybody else does, so it doesn't look like I'm responding to whatever comes after this. I want to apologize for the only sentence in my whole career I've ever regretted stating. And it has been pointed out that I have had a pretty colorful career. I've been pretty outspoken, and I've said some pretty nasty things about our American neighbors and a few other things. I regret none of that. This one sentence I regret deeply. It's not how I think. It's not how I feel. Wake me up with a flashlight in the eye in the middle of the night. It is not me. Never has been, never will be. And I don't want to talk about the circumstances around how it was exposed because that doesn't make it any better. I don't want to make excuses. I just want you to know it's pretty devastating to me, but I imagine it's more devastating to Deputy Chief Berkeley Brown. I took a lot of time to read through her career, and it has not been easy. She's had a lot of bumps along the road. And what comes through is massive persistence and dedication. So to take her most wonderful moment and have my words spoil that is what I regret the most. Because those words are empty. They mean nothing because there's no substance behind them. But for them to affect her most joyous moment has made me very regretful. And I thank you for listening.
Thank you. Councillor Sato.
Thank you. Wow. It's a hard one to follow, but I do have questions about the report. And I guess my concern, I was very concerned about the comments. Councillor Parrish has commented on what she said. But I'm also extremely concerned that the deputy was put into a position of having these comments made public by the Police Services Board, and in particular the chair of the board. I think that was absolutely a horrible thing to do to someone. I'm very concerned with the report. We're here today dealing with the report that you've given, and we have one side of a conversation. And I was commenting this morning to Councillor Cook. He made a comment to me, and I said, if I took your comment out of context, it would sound pretty bad, without having my response to him and his further response. I think that is a deplorable way of dealing with something of this magnitude. I think it is absolutely deplorable that it was made public. I think it should have been dealt with, absolutely. But it should not have been dealt with in such a way that caused embarrassment to an officer of Peel Regional Police. I'm absolutely appalled that that happened, and that half a story was given and half a story was used. Half of a conversation, that assumptions were made, that if I looked at some of the assumptions that are here, I might have assumed a different side of the conversation. So I think I mentioned earlier in the other report that assumptions can come back and bite you in the butt. The conversation, as my understanding from reading Councillor Parrish's lawyer's report, is that this conversation was not privy to freedom of information discussion at all, and we have a written statement attesting to that from the city's lawyer that we received. All members of council know that if it's on a private phone, it does not belong to the municipality and it should not be shared. It's private, confidential conversation. Obviously, that means nothing. And that really bothers me. That really bothers me that a member of this council would share private conversation publicly and embarrass a member of our wonderful police force publicly. And I'm afraid that when I read the report, my reading of the report was tainted by that, absolutely tainted by it. There's information in the report, there's statements that are not accurate, that Peel Regional Police are not employees of the Region of Peel. They do not report to the Region of Peel, and I have that also in writing from David Schwark, They are not employees. So assuming that the comments relating to employees in the code of conduct apply, that's erroneous. And so when I read that and I read assumptions and I see half of a conversation, and I question the report. I absolutely question the report. I don't question the fact that Councillor Parrish said words that she should not have said. She absolutely should not have, and she has acknowledged that. But what I'm reading in front of me is, I guess I'm baffled. I mean, we know it's very clear that you can't trust having private conversations that are supposed to be confidential. And I feel very bad for our police officers who can't trust that something that is said is not going to be made public. I absolutely find that deplorable. And the inference in here that someone on the Police Services Board leaked information is extremely worrisome as well. And I don't see that questioned at all. I could make inferences as to who leaked the information, but I'm not. But I really have concern with some of your conclusions. I really do, because I don't have both sides of the story. I understand that the comments on their own need dealing with. But you don't bring a report like this without having the full story. You need, I assume that Councillor McFadden gave you both sides of the conversation, because otherwise, I don't think our police would take something to court with having one side of a conversation taken out of context. So that is my concern. That is my concern with the report. I'm going to move receipt of the report. If you can bring back the full conversation, the full context of that conversation, then I might be prepared to look at it further. But I shook my head when I read it. And I read Councillor Parrish's lawyer's statement, and I read her affidavit as well. And I listened to her. I don't always agree with Councillor Parrish, and we have butted heads many, many times. So I'm not sitting here today defending what she said. But I'm just appalled by the report, and I'm appalled at the behavior of the Police Services Board and a member of our council. I think it was, I'd question why. I would really question why only one side of a conversation was used and was reported. And it's extremely suspicious that the rest of the conversation was not here in front of us.
Did you would like to respond to that, please?
Actually, is this on? Thank you. I had a few comments that I thought would be helpful.
Okay.
I will not assume that everybody has read the report in detail, so I would like to make a few comments just with respect to the report, and then I will respond to Councillor Sato's comments to the best of my ability. So we were appointed, as everybody knows, in January of 2018, and one of certainly the overarching objectives in having an integrity commissioner is trying to ensure a robust and effective policy and procedure to enhance the public's perception that council conducts itself and meets ethical standards, and where those standards are not met, that there is a mechanism for review. In February of this year, Councillor Parrish sent to Councillor McFadden, in her capacity as chair of the Police Services Board, text messages relating to and disparaging of the superintendent's abilities, and in doing so made disparaging remarks about not only the individual, but also regarding the police promotional process. Those remarks called into question the role of race in the board's promotion practices. The texts in question are set out in the report verbatim. And the information conveyed, even though in the form of text messages, does constitute a business communication. And Councillor McFadden, in her capacity as Police Services Board Chair, and being in the midst of a promotion process, brought the messages to the attention of the board. Coming in the midst of a promotion in which the superintendent, who is now the deputy chief, was central, the Police Services Board was deeply disturbed by the messages and filed a complaint. Thus, the text messages became the subject matter of the investigation. The texts were sent, the recipient was alarmed, the board was informed, the board was alarmed, and the complaint was filed. Our role in providing an investigation to you is to bring you, following a fair process, a recommendation report, which you have before you. We received the complaint on April 6th. I will not repeat the complaint, but it is contained in the body of the report before you. We conducted a fair and balanced investigation and included interviews of the complaint board, of the respondent, Councillor Parrish, and of other relevant witnesses, and a review of the Peel Code of Conduct and other relevant policies and legislation. We provided the information necessary to Councillor Parrish in order that she could meaningfully respond. She may have wanted more information, but it was not possible to provide her more, either because of our process, which met standards of procedural fairness, or because we did not have it to give. We did not, for example, have any of the responding text messages, which may or may not have been sent from Councillor McFadden back to Councillor Parrish. Neither councillor could provide them, nor could the service provider. Nevertheless, there was sufficient information upon which to conclude that the words that appeared in the texts were Councillor Parrish's words and were capable of plain language interpretation. The Peel Code of Conduct provides its stated purpose as promoting high standards of ethical conduct of the chair and members of council. In particular, the Code of Conduct requires that members conduct themselves with decorum, demonstrating respect towards colleagues and staff. As noted in the Code of Conduct, the Ontario Human Rights Code also applies to members of council. The Human Rights Code provides that every person has the right to be free from racial discrimination in a place of employment. In accordance with the principles of procedural fairness, on May 29th, we provided Councillor Parrish with our preliminary findings report and invited her to provide response by June 6th, which was eventually extended to June 26th. We received 2 submissions from the councillor's lawyer, the first expressing preliminary concerns and seeking additional information, the second providing a substantive response. The letter that was circulated with Councillor Parrish's letter accompanying our report on this agenda today was sent to us as a result of the preliminary findings report. This has not been an easy investigation, but the process of providing preliminary findings to the respondent and seeking comments in response, while not required, is a helpful part of the process in preparing the final report. In this instance, it clarified that certain findings in our report were being read with emphasis which was not intended. In particular, we did not intend to conclude with certainty that Councillor Parrish was aware of the promotion process. In addition, some phraseology was being read as inflammatory, which too was not intended. We revisited our report, and what you have before you is our final report. As a result of our investigation, and regardless of whether Councillor Parrish knew that there was a promotional process underway, we find that the statements in the text messages discredit and disparage the Deputy Chief, her character, her ability, and suggest that her promotion was based on race and gender rather than ability, experience, and character. This applies whether you read the word promotion in the text as referencing her promotion to superintendent or any pending promotion to Deputy Chief. Whether the Police Services Board thought Councillor Parrish somehow had become aware of the promotion process does not change the essence of the comment. The message in the text is clear. And notwithstanding that we hear today Councillor Parrish's heartfelt apology and acknowledge that, we do find in the report that the text messages do impugn the hiring and promotion practices of the Police Services Board, who is the complainant, and that the statements do constitute discrimination under the Ontario Human Rights Code, and that the statements breach the Peel Code of Conduct. And we know that there are those who will say it's only a text message. It's nothing. It could have been worse. Indeed, it could have been worse. It could have been a tweet. That would have been worse. But the words in the text messages are not nothing. The words of the text message are offensive. And there are those who will say the texts were a private comment. They were not intended to be shared, but they were shared. And texts are a way of communicating, and they are a business record. They may feel more casual in today's technological era, but they are just as relevant as email. And these comments are unacceptable, particularly coming from an elected official. We understand that the words were uttered when Councillor Parrish was upset, following what she perceived as shortcomings in performance at a community meeting. However, the messages forming part of the business record of conversation between council colleagues and pertaining to employee performance issues, ostensibly to the board's own promotional process, were perceived by the board as a matter serious enough to warrant action, and we agree. Members of council must recognize that words matter. The community, the public at large, look to their elected representatives not only for leadership and wisdom, but for integrity, respect, and compassion. We are of the view that the offensive text messages were so unacceptable that regardless of the motive or intention, a penalty is warranted to clearly send the message that such behavior falls below the standard expected of elected officials. Recognizing the principles of progressive discipline, which are applied when employees are sanctioned for violating policies in the course of their employment, we feel it appropriate that a nominal penalty be imposed for this violation. A monetary penalty, although not remedial, can have a salutary effect and serve as a deterrent. In this regard, we would admonish the councillor to be more mindful of blunt and intemperate comments. In this case, we recommend council impose a 5-day suspension of pay. More importantly, we believe that this investigation highlights the need for a greater understanding on the part of Councillor Parrish and perhaps other councillors of the region that if ever it was in some circles tolerable, it is no longer acceptable to even casually undermine the accomplishments of persons on the basis of their color, sex, or other prohibited grounds. We recommend that, much as Starbucks has done in response to a single incident, as a preventative measure, Peel Regional Council should engage a qualified person to provide sensitivity training, which includes, at a minimum, exploration of sex and race-based biases. Finally, we wish to publicly thank everyone who asked to participate in our investigation, who was asked to participate, and express our genuine appreciation for the sharing of time, knowledge, and opinions by everyone concerned. Councillor Sato, I'm not sure whether that answered the questions that you had put to us, and if not, I'm happy to.
Sorry, I guess they were more comments and questions, but the first question was, why would you not require both sides of the conversation?
As we have explained in the report, neither the complainant, neither Councillor McFadden, who's chair of the Police Services Board, Police Services Board, lodged the complaint. But neither Councillor McFadden, who was the recipient of the text messages, nor Councillor Parrish, who was the sender of the text messages, had, as they advised us, retained copies of any of the surrounding texts, whatever they may have been, and our attempts to obtain those through both Councillor McFadden and Councillor Parrish and back through the service provider were not successful. They are not retained by the service provider. So we were not able to obtain any. We did not see that that created an impediment to proceeding with the investigation on the strength of not having some surrounding texts, the contents of which we were not made aware in any case. We certainly did not feel that this was a matter to preclude conducting the investigation that the complainant had quite legitimately lodged.
Okay. With regard to your comment 55, it has been suggested that text messages were confidential. We note the text sent between councillors are subject to retention. We have a legal statement from the City of Mississauga lawyer that states the exact opposite, that unless the messages are on city equipment paid for by the city, they are not the property of the municipality. They cannot be subpoenaed for or requested and provided through freedom of information, and that actually sharing the text is a violation of the Code of Conduct of the City of Mississauga. We had a situation where this occurred several years ago with the previous Integrity Commissioner who was investigating when a member of council shared a confidential internal email, and no one owned up to sharing that with the media. And it was explained to us at that time through freedom of information by Mary Ellen Bench, our lawyer, and all members of council have the memo that she sent that states that that information, those confidential texts that are personal, that are not in the property of the city, are not liable for that. So I'm questioning your statement here. The other statement is, I'm not sure why. I realize that it doesn't impact your comments, but the statement that Peel Regional Police are Region of Peel employees, while they are not. So the policies and statements that you have applied based on that are not accurate. And it's concerns like this that raises concerns with the report itself. But I am mostly concerned, I am extremely concerned that both sides of this conversation were not shared. I find that appalling that anyone would share one half of a conversation. And I fully understand that the comments were made. The comments were absolutely terrible. They were appalling comments that the councillor made. But I'm talking about the process here.
So, if I may, let me just respond, I think, first to the comment with respect to the legal advice that you have from your city solicitor, and I have absolutely no doubt that that advice is perfectly accurate with respect to the issue that it pertains to. This is not a situation where somebody has sought through Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy legislation, access to texts between two councillors. Let me give the analogy, for example, if a council member were to send a text to a constituent, and that constituent were to go to another body, not necessarily an agency of the Region of Peel, such as Police Services Board, but perhaps to the media and say, look at this text that I obtained. I think it would be cold comfort to a councillor to say, I have a legal opinion from my city solicitor that says that those are not FOIable. So the issue for this complaint, councillor, is not with respect to whether those texts would be FOIable. The issue is that the texts were the subject matter of a complaint from the Police Services Board to the Integrity Commissioner, and we conducted the investigation on that basis.
Councillor Miles.
Excuse me. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I do believe that this council adopted a code of conduct for a reason, and we also hired an integrity commissioner to do the investigation, be impartial, and provide council with a fair and unbiased recommendation in regards to whatever complaint they receive. I think the Integrity Commissioner's report, and I think even more so the explanation that we have received today from the Integrity Commissioner, shows that they gave careful consideration to the whole matter at hand with the information that they were provided. I think in light of Councillor Parrish's comments, in addition to the remorse she feels about this particular incident, she has not said that that she didn't say the words that are subject of this complaint. I would move the recommendation in the report from the Integrity Commissioner. I know Councillor Sato has put on a motion for receipt, but if that comes first, Mr. Chairman, I would
take that motion first. I need a seconder, though, for it.
Okay, you can take that first, but then I would put on the motion with the recommendation that is in the report. I really don't believe council can take this matter lightly. I'll leave it at that. I think enough has been said. But I would need a seconder for putting the recommendation forward. If
On the
someone
receipt
is-
motion, Councillor Cook has seconded it, so, but you'll need a seconder if that fails.
Is anyone willing to second my motion to move the recommendation of the Integrity Commissioner? That's been moved. Good. Thank you.
So Raz would second that. Councillor Unica.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be very brief, but I do think it requires a few words. First of all, let me say I'm very grateful that Councillor Parrish has apologized unequivocally, and I think that's very, very important, especially in the manner in which she's couched it for a career that she regrets nothing else to regret this. I think that sets it in a very good light. And as I told her the night after it happened, because I called her, I said, it is not in keeping with the person that I've known for 30 years. And I can say that about Carolyn. That having been said, I'm a little bit concerned of how it's progressed, in that the fact of the matter remains is that it happened. And you can't pretend that it didn't happen. So once it was transmitted, I'm not sure if I'm a contrarian, but I think you put a lot of people in an untenable position when they've got to make a decision on whether, well, if it happened, it didn't happen, it's a matter of record in writing, how do I deal with it? I think the choice that they have, and to argue process, I would argue materiality instead. What actually happened? Do you know the thought that I had with regards to all of it, as uncomfortable as it is? It's the inquiry on Indigenous individuals and what's happened there. What an uncomfortable discussion. but we're better off for having had the discussion. So if we had to make an error, I'm glad we made the error we did. It was on behalf of transparency. I think that matters to us. As difficult as this is, I'm glad we're having the conversation. I think we owe that to everybody involved. I've made mistakes before. Sometimes you think you want to sweep them, but you don't learn as much as saying, here's what I did, I apologize, I hope it's a teachable moment for all of us. And I think this has been a learning moment for all of us. The second point that I want to make, and this is probably the main reason why I rise, just as fate would have it, and I thank Mayor Crombie for this, she organized another one of those marvelous symposiums where the mayor calls in our young women future leaders. And there we were at Sea Cafe, and Elizabeth Dowdswell, and I'm going to forget her last name, the lieutenant governor, was the speaker. Marvelous. And as fate would have it, I was there, and I was with many of the young, soon-to-be leaders in our community, women in our community from my high school. And wouldn't you know it, Deputy Chief Ingrid Berkeley Brown sits next to me. First time I had any time to deal with her and talk with her, and in 1 hour that I spent with her, what an amazing woman. What an ambassador for the force. What sophistication, what integrity, what class. Proud to think that after 30 years she made it through the ranks. I was proud of our chief and the process that brought her to this point. And if we covered this up, I wouldn't have the chance to stand up here and tell her that. If she was here, I'd look her in the eyes and say, I was there, I've seen into your eyes, I've heard who you are, and I'm proud of you, and you were undeserving of this. And so I think we have to stand up and say that. And that's why I think, difficult as it is, this is something we all learn from. I think we have to reaffirm our support of the chief and what she's done and the staff that we have. We have to reaffirm our support of Ingrid Berkeley Brown, and that's what we're doing today. And far more important, Chief, you'll recall the last time you were here, as the old white guy in the room, what I said at the time was, I wish I understood more about this intersectionality. The folks in our communities that are more hard done by, and outcomes don't always go their way. Not unusual for women and women of color. And here's someone who's the poster child for it today. How is it that this woman ended up in these crosshairs? It's just not right. She's someone that's gone to work for 30 years, worked through the ranks under very difficult and challenging circumstances, and she got to this point and had to face challenges like this that I, as an old white guy of 30 years, would never have faced. And to me, that's the teachable moment in all of this. So it was unfortunate. I think the councillor's done the right thing and expressed her regret, and she did that to me privately as well. I think we have to accept the findings of the report. We've all learned from it. I think we all in unison have to tell Ingrid, we are proud of you and the level that you've achieved. I'm glad we assessed it, and we are and erred on the side of transparency. And I hope, as I have, I hope we've all learned something from this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cook.
Thank you. The report, the Commissioner's, the Integrity Commissioner's report I've read. I've also read the report from Councillor Sato's, our Councillor Parrish's council. And what strikes me immediately, and I think everybody here knows my background as a researcher. I'm an author. I've spent 25 years doing research for 4 books. And what bothers me about the Integrity Commissioner's report, in my text of research, it's incomplete. I would like to see the complete text messages, because I can't take 2 lines out of a message and relate them as to how they relate to the whole picture without understanding the whole picture. When I write a book, when I write a story, if I were just to see 2 lines, I'd have to spend all my time trying to find out what led to those 2 lines and how they actually affect and interact with the rest of the story. And that is just not happening. And I point out in the report, or the report from the Councillors' Council, that, and I'm going to quote, only retained and presented partial portions of the text messages which oddly exclude her own responses. That's a comment that bothers me, because it's obvious that we don't have the complete messages. And then it goes on to say further down, that conclusion is wholly at odds with the universality accepted principle, including by the Supreme Court of Canada, that all words should always be read in their entire context. That isn't happening here. So therefore, I can't support the Integrity Commissioner's recommendation. I think what we have to do is just move receipt. And I think we've all learned a great deal, and I'm quite sure that Councillor Parrish, and I've heard her comments, and I think she is feeling very bad about everything. And I think enough has been said today on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sprovieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been the target of several complaints in the last couple of years, and my council were very understanding of the situation and did not impose the penalties that were recommended to me. I want to say that I appreciate the Integrity Commissioner's report. And from a technical perspective, I believe that you brought us the proper recommendation here in what to do in this situation. But from a human perspective, understanding sometimes the emotions and the passion that we councillors have to deal with and the situations that we deal with. I can understand why sometimes we say things that maybe are off the cuff and probably not correct, not proper, politically correct, whatever you want to call it. And I understand that these things happen. And I know Councillor Parrish. I know her reputation about how she stamped on George Bush's doll when the U.S. invaded Iraq. And I totally was, now we know that she was totally right in what she tried to, the message that she tried to portray to the world about what the U.S. did in the Middle East. So in this situation, and given that the councillor is, I think she understands that what she said was not proper, and she's made that clear in her statement. And also, I have to say that I've known the Berkeley Brown for a number of years. I've dealt with many issues in my ward when she was superintendent here in Division 21, and I've met with her on many issues, and I found her to be an excellent superintendent. She worked on all the issues, resolved many, but some of them were very difficult, of course, like break-in entries that happen regularly. But I haven't received any complaints from that area where it was happening. Obviously, the police. She made sure the police were there, had a presence, and are scaring away the people. So I have the greatest respect for Superintendent Brown, and I know that she did not deserve the words that were said. But as I said, sometimes in anger, words come out, and Councillor Parrish has apologized. She understands what she did, and I give her credit for that. It's not that she's standing here and saying, you know, I said the right thing, and I stand what I said. I stand by what I said, and that's not Councillor Parrish. I think Councillor Parrish has very high standards. I believe that she fights for the right things, and I believe that she just, it was a slip of tongue in anger. It was just words of anger. She wanted to get something, and that was probably not reasonable, and out of frustration, those words came out. So I have to give her the benefit of the doubt, and knowing Councillor Parrish and her passion, and she's a passionate person. I know she is, just like, and I'm very similar to her passion, and I think that I think she needs a break. I think this is her first offense. I don't think she has ever gotten in trouble before. So everybody, not from the Integrity Commissioner anyway. So I believe everybody deserves a chance, a second chance. I think that given Councillor Parrish's reputation, I think she deserves a break. So I'm going to support receiving the report. But I also want to say to the Integrity Commissioners that I believe you, from a technical perspective, you did the right job. And we thank you for that. And keep doing it whenever things happen. Because this is what, when things are brought to the open, is when people sometimes realize their mistakes and learn from that. And I'm sure Councillor Parrish has learned a lot after all these years in politics. She's learned her lesson. So I'm just going to support the receipt of the report, and not impose the penalty that's been recommended. Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair.
Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly this is a really uncomfortable position. I think that all of us around this table are placed in. A lot of times when we're angry, we do say things that we shouldn't say, but that doesn't excuse the comments or towards the superintendent. And I heard Councillor Parrish's apology. She owned it. She apologized publicly. I believe that the apology was very sincere. And certainly it's a lesson. It's a lesson to all of us. I know comments have been made over the years. I mean, people, geez, they make comments on social media. And sometimes you wish you could take those words back, but owning up to those and owning up to what was said, I think is the right step. And certainly, when you're in a heated debate and a heated discussion, sometimes you tend to say things that you don't really mean. So I guess one of the things that I'm a little disappointed with is how the whole thing unfolded, and I think that it would be incumbent on the counselor who received the text messages to really talk to the counselor who sent the messages and sort of figure this out before it moved to this step at the next stage. Because I don't think that the superintendent should be exposed to this, and I think that it probably could be something that would have been resolved among the parties. But anyway, it's here. And I've worked with Councillor Parrish for a number of years. I've never heard her utter a racist comment to me or said anything. The only thing that I do know is that she is an advocate for her community, and she respects her community, and she fights for her community. And again, sometimes you say things that you really don't mean. And I don't know the situation, so I'm not going to comment on that when it was said and that. But certainly, I apologize. Also, I mean, I'd like the superintendent to know that, and the police, and Chief Evans and your entire staff. We have always supported you. You don't police Caledon, but I think we've always been very supportive of yourself and your officers and your superintendents and that. And so I will vote in favor of moving receipt because I think that this is a lesson that all of us can learn from. None of us are perfect because we're all humans. And I do agree with Councillor Cook is that the report is incomplete because I too would have liked to see the other responses and the entire thread. And I hear what you said, and I heard what you said, that you weren't able to retrieve it. But I don't know how this would work in a court of law. I honestly don't know. But it would have been nice to see that. I've been one for a complaint filed to the Integrity Commissioner, and it was, anyway, it was unfounded. But I would have liked to have seen the entire conversation and not just bits and pieces of it. So thank you for the report, and thank you.
Councillor Stark.
Well, truly, this is probably one of the, excuse me, one of the most difficult topics and decisions, and just the whole discussion that we've ever had at this council. And I asked just previously to the meeting, have we ever had one like this? And I guess we haven't. And unfortunately, I think there should have been probably a little bit more information. I think we were driven by the fact we thought that maybe this was the last council meeting, and I think today we found that there's probably another one in September. I hope that wasn't the case. But what we have to do here is start a healing process. And the healing process basically is between the person that made the comments and our great police force. I mean, when Adrian spoke, I mean, you're dead on. I mean, we have a great force. We don't want to have any sort of implication or innuendo or whatever saying that there are any difficulties within that police force when it comes to topics like this. I think from Councillor Parrish's viewpoint, it's probably one of the most regrettable things she's ever said. Many of you know that her father was a police officer, and that's what even makes it probably more difficult for her. I'd like to get rid of this painful process. It's almost like an operation. If you're sick, you're ill, something's wrong, get it done, fix it. And I think that's why today we have to fix it. I'm going to make even a further suggestion that, and I'm not sure if the council will agree to it, but I think there should be probably a face-to-face with the deputy and maybe even with the police association. And maybe, you know, sometimes in a forum like this, you don't get all the feelings and facts out. And I really think something like that, which is so important to all of us at the Region of Peel, so important to our police force. And I don't know if that's workable, but I personally, I mean, tried to put myself in the councillor's position to say, what would I do? This is what I would do, because I think we have to heal this whole process and make sure that we all understand that we have to correct it in the right fashion. And the difficult that is, I'm sure every one of us has a personal side opinion. We've probably all said something maybe off, off limits, off topic, off something. But we've never got to the point where we've had to defend ourselves. And Councillor Parrish is probably one of the greatest fighters for her community, has probably done the most for her ward in 30 years. She's fought for everybody, no matter what their backgrounds, color, diversity, religion. She's done that. And I think when we see a small excerpt of her life, there's got to be a better way. I think the penalties or whatever certainly are something that nobody has really discussed here, but I think that's something that should be done. But to me, it's a difficult process. It's a healing process, and I really think that that we should take a look at her case, but at the same time, to have this happen to a high-ranking police officer who's worked through the process for over 30 years in her own right, and from everything I hear, has done a wonderful job. We, as councillors, have to defend that person too. And we depend on our police force. They depend on us to support them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Crombie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to Councillor Parrish and colleagues, it's been a difficult process, troubling, unfortunate. I know that Councillor Parrish concedes that her comments were hurtful, they were intemperate, and completely inappropriate, no matter what circumstance. And she knows that, and we heard that in her voice today. She apologized unequivocally. She regrets. She is truly sorry, and I will defend her too by saying that she has been a very dedicated councillor. Her work has been exemplary. She cares deeply about the community, and what she's done there has been transformative. And I know those comments are not who she is because I know how passionate she is. However, on the other side of this, our workplaces must be kept respectful, free of discrimination and harassment, and we as elected officials have that responsibility to be held to the highest moral and ethical standard possible. And to argue somehow the rules or the process, I think, is just wrong-headed here. Things were said that shouldn't have been said, and the councillor has conceded and agreed with that. We all have been the greatest advocates for greater diversity, inclusiveness in our city, and accepting everyone. Our council has embraced that, and we've worked positively to ensure that our institutions are reflective of the communities we serve, including the police force, and the chief has done a wonderful job in trying to broaden the diversity on the force. Councillor McFadden, on her part, is co-chair of DIAC, our Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee, and she's chair of the Police Services Board. So in that context, I can see when receiving these comments, she felt obliged in her capacity to bring that forward. Now, to the chief, I have full confidence in your hiring practices that are all based on merit, and that Deputy Berkeley Brown is more than ever more deserving of this well-earned promotion. And I congratulate her on achieving it. I have come to know her in the community, admire her greatly. As I mentioned last meeting, she really smoked me in the last race, but that's okay. She's been a veteran of the force for 32 years. She's highly educated and worked in several areas across the force, in uniform patrol, community services, and race and ethnic relations bureau. She's really demonstrated her commitment to bettering our community. She volunteers with various organizations, including Peel Multicultural and the Congress of Black Women. In fact, I saw her recently at the scholarship breakfast that I attended as well. So, Councillor Parrish, I know regrets these comments. And as I said, it's not the person that I know. She's a champion for the community, and it was a lapse. So I would like personally to volunteer, as maybe all of us should, to take the sensitivity training. I think we could all elevate ourselves and learn something. We will all learn something. It is important given the cities, the communities that we live in. We could all do better. Not one of us has sent an email or a text that maybe we have regretted and could have thought twice about. Maybe we should have slept on it before we sent something. And I know that Councillor Parrish regrets it. I understand the position that Councillor McFadden was placed in, given the responsibility that's been bestowed on her. I think we all agree the comment was inappropriate and wrong. But she's sorry. So if council decides, and notwithstanding if you decide or not, I hope we all take the sensitivity training, and I hope that we do it voluntarily, because I think there's something that we can all learn and we can all do better. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cook.
Yes, thank you. To the Integrity Commissioner, I in no way was knocking you, sir. What I was saying is that I think the job you did was done with the information you had on hand. So I'm not knocking your report. I was just simply stating that I felt that there should have been more information available. Having said that, I would like to, as the seconder of the motion, ask for a recorded vote on that, please. Yeah.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Wow, what a way to end a term, really. The uncomfortable conversation around the table, I don't think is anything that we would wish on anyone. I want to address the comments of Adrian Woolley and acknowledge the work that the Police Association does in terms of coaching and mentoring young officers that come into the force. I can't disagree with the comments that you made this morning in terms of, the message that in isolation of of all of the information those young officers, regardless of what their background might be and what they bring to the table, it's difficult in a community to attract and retain good officers who are passionate about the job, and the kind of conversation we're having here today doesn't make that any easier. And I want to acknowledge that very much so, and to express appreciation for the work that you do as an association. I do have to say, though, I do think that the Police Services Board could have handled this differently, and Councillor McFadden, as your role there, I understand that you felt that action needed to be taken. I do think that there was a way that allowed for an exemplary officer to not have her integrity called into question in such a public way. I agree with Councillor Sato on that. I think that a lot of people through this have had their dignity tarnished in a way that was, in my view, completely unnecessary. I am incredibly troubled by the fact that we don't have the privilege of the entire text. I know you think that that's not important, but I think it's vitally important. If I wrote a note about something and threw it in the garbage can and somebody pulled it out and said, "Did you write this?" and I said, "Yes," in the isolation of knowing what the note that I maybe passed to somebody was all about, you could build a story around it. And I'm not excusing the comment that was made in any way, shape, or form. But there's a story built around the text for which we have not got the benefit of understanding the back and forth of the text message. I think that's unfortunate, and I don't think it serves anybody well, and it certainly does not serve the deputy chief, the newly appointed deputy chief, well. So I am incredibly troubled by that. When I read the report from Principal's Integrity, it sounds logical and reasonable moving forward. There are some questions that were raised in my mind. When I read the response from the lawyer that Councillor Parrish had retained, to be honest, I read it and thought that they shot a lot of holes in the report that you put before us. That's my own perception of that. But I hate to see the good, all of the good, that Councillor Parrish has contributed to public life. And trust me, Councillor Parrish and I have had our differences over the years, many of them. And, I'd hate to see the text messages that went back and forth between her and I on that, perhaps. And I don't mean to make light of it, but, there were times when, Councillor Parrish and I don't always agree, many times, in fact, mostly don't agree with some of the colorful language and colorful approach that she takes to many issues. But she has contributed enormous good to the region of Peel and the residents who call the region of Peel. And I think it's really sad that this one incident that, in my opinion, should have and could have been handled in a much more dignified way, somehow all the good evaporates through the conversation that we're having here today. I think it's really unfortunate. There is no right answer. There is no right recorded vote. There is no right vote on this. It was made, the comment was made, it was acknowledged, it was owned, it was apologized for in the most sincere way. And I do agree with Councillor Starr. It's time for the healing to begin. And I know that Councillor Parrish is one of the first ones that when she screws up, tries to make it right. And I know that she will start the healing process and have that candid and sincere conversation that needs to take place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Raz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the report, Janice. And I think we've all been a little uncomfortable this morning. It's been acknowledged, and I'm sure we've all sent our fair share of texts in the past that if it landed on the front page of the newspaper, none of us would be proud. I recognize that. I guess the issue we face is when we brought in both the lobbyist registry and brought integrity commissioners on board, their role is to look at things, our conduct, in a fair and unbiased opinion, or in a fair and unbiased way. So that being said, I appreciate Councillor Parrish's apology this morning. I think it was truly genuine. But I also think that this report will make us think twice about how we treat others, both our residents and fellow councillors, elevate ourselves the way that our residents expect us, which is to set an example and to not move forward with the recommendations. And I do believe that the admonishment is nominal, and I would agree that we should all take that sensitivity training. I think that's unfair to what happened to Deputy Berkeley Brown. I think we need to show our appreciation for the police services that provide safety within our communities, and we need to rebuild those bridges. So that's why I say we move forward with this. I know there are people who question the process. At the end of the day, this isn't about process. It was said, it was acknowledged, we need to move forward in a constructive way, but in a way that we reaffirm our support for police services and the diversity, and recognize the diversity within our entire region. So that I'm happy to second the motion that Councillor Miles puts forward, and we need to move along. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Probably toughest thing for me to talk about, in that no amount of humor is going to fix this, and 35 years of knowing someone and being pretty much her best friend probably makes me somewhat subjective in my comments, but I'll try to keep it as straight on the agenda as possible. I was present when every material thing happened in this particular case, and really, without getting into retrying it, so to speak, or relitigating it, there's good parts of me that are quite upset at what came out and what didn't come out. And I certainly appreciate Councillor Parrish's heartfelt apology. When you know someone for so many years, you know, you can see fundamentally Carolyn might have a couple character flaws. One is anger management, which may be the course she should be sent on, and secondly, extreme passion for her community that she loves. She went through a very hard, and I'm not excusing her, but just a little picture of what happened. Very hard process with that police station of hers, and I don't want to get into too many details. Was very unhappy with everything that happened in that process, and was not a great outcome for her. And I didn't happen to be present when the text got sent. I've saved her many times from other ones, but this one I wasn't present for, so I would have stopped it if I could have, but it wasn't possible. I am privileged to knowing what was in the rest of those texts, and I don't want to discuss it because at this point it's hearsay. But I do think you can draw a negative inference, as the legal people would say, from the fact that someone was so careful to hand in certain screenshots, but was equally careful to make sure the other ones disappeared. So for this, it's nothing to do with the complaint at all, which is, of course, inexcusable comments about Deputy Chief, but that part of the process sticks in my craw, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't at least mention that. But be that as it may, the committee, the integrity commissioners had their findings, in which are materially correct, and have found Councillor Parrish in violation of those parts of our operating procedure. But before, if you want to really know what humiliation feels like, you should have spent the last 90 days with Councillor Parrish. She was very regretful throughout the whole process, and couldn't believe that she was stupid enough to make those comments. I don't think I've ever seen Carolyn so, honest to God, I got tired of hearing her apologize about her behavior. I hadn't, I know what I'd say if I didn't want to get the next complaint against me. It was a something up, and she recognized that right from the get-go. I said, well, you're going to have to take your lumps, because in today's world, what you said doesn't get a pass. It's tough medicine you're going to have to take. But it is, I think Councillor Nando said, a teachable moment, and then we have to move on to reconciliation. The constant torture, a lot of people take a fair amount of pride in Carolyn's work, and to set her off for the summer holidays with a big cloud hanging over her wouldn't be fair either. I think it's very appropriate to receive the report and, in fact, and endorse its findings. But however, the additional humiliation of finding somebody $1,000 or a week's pay and have to go to class. I mean, Carolyn could teach that class. I'll never see. Really, it's kind of a tragic part. That's just true. And just before we vote on this, or we have another speaker, I think it would behoove everyone if you just heard for a moment just a short list of the humanitarian work that Councillor Parrish has done, both as as an MP and as a councillor and a school trustee. And starting with her early career, she put an end to corporal punishment in Peel schools back when they said spare the rod and spoil the child. And that barbaric practice ended, and with many thanks from the principals of the day who said that they hated giving the kids this trap. She negotiated with the Human Rights Commission to allow the Sikh students to wear their kirpans to school, despite the Peel board having voted it down. She actually went to the hearing and said, notwithstanding that the Peel board doesn't support me as the chairman of the board on this, we can come up with some kind of compromise. And the Human Rights Chair of the day, Dr. Plout, agreed with her, and they came up with a formula that the Sikh students could wear the kirpan to school. And to the best of my knowledge, that's been 100% success for the last 30 years. And very importantly, she introduced the idea of benefits, health benefits for gay and lesbian employees and their partners at the Peel board when the prevailing objection was that we can't give gay people their benefits because they'll just drag their friends down to the dentist and say that's my partner, which was sadly a prevailing view at the time. Fortunately, I'm not aware of anybody doing that, and it's been, again, some 30 years since that went through. In her career, she's raised $3 million for humanitarian causes like the Cancer Society, a ban on landmines, which are reprehensible, and recently over $1 million for the Milk Fund in Peel to help sponsor the kids to get a decent breakfast and lunch. She's sponsored children in developing countries, promoted equity by supporting dental health for seniors, and is a big supporter of Habitat for Humanity to help with the housing. So, and little things like affordable bus fares for seniors, for goodness sake. So I know I leave it with you to determine where the punishment ends and where reconciliation begins, but I guess the greatest thing that we could do to get through this would be to accept the admonishment, which I know Carolyn does, and put her back to work where she belongs to continue her great contribution to the region of Peel and to her ward in Ward 5. I think I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ennis.
Thank you. I don't think anyone around this table is second-guessing Councillor Parrish's sincerity in her apology or her life's work of giving back to the community by any means. But there has been a great talk about moving forward and starting the healing process. And I personally cannot support just receiving the recommendation after we've heard from our own Police Services Association that says that they support the full recommendation. I think in order to start the healing process, accountability is part of it, but we all too, sitting around this table, have to take accountability for that decision that we're making. Are we supporting the report and its full recommendations as being requested, not only by our integrity commissioners, but as well as our police services, so that we can then start the healing process? I think that's the question that we're all going to be answering. So I can't support just supporting the receipt. Councillor Parrish knows that what she said was wrong. She's fully admitted it. She's apologized for it. I think that we're all willing to move forward and work together. You know, we pride ourselves on being a very inclusive and diverse region. In fact, probably the most diverse and inclusive region throughout this entire country. So I think that moving forward, we have to start the healing process, but that can only begin when we've finished the process and took a very clear, loud stance as councillors that those words are not acceptable. Whether they've apologized or not, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how we got to where we are, the words are not acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Switching back and forth there. Councillor Shaughnessy.
Okay. Emotional times. I do not see, Councillor Ennis, how a penalty means that you're going to heal. To say that you can only start healing once there's been a penalty doesn't make sense to me. If every time any one of us had handed over a text or said or informed somebody else about terrible things that another councillor had said on another councillor, and on and on and on. I mean, I'm talking about throwing the first stone. I mean, we cannot, we will all agree that what was put in that quick text was not who Carolyn Parrish is or anybody that we want anybody to be. It was totally, from my perspective, handled inappropriately. There should have been some sort of a communication, some sort of a meeting of the people to actually go forward. I've seen a lot in the 4 years, but what I've seen is counselor on counselor. That's unacceptable. In my own place at the town of Caledon and at the Region of Peel. It's unfortunate. But what I'm truly worried about is democracy, because what we don't want is to create a council that becomes nothing more than a bureaucracy where everybody's afraid to advocate. And passion comes with its risks, there's no doubt. But for people, are we going to create a system where councillors are afraid to step up because somebody might construe what they said? I know there's no misconstruing on what Councillor Parrish said. It was in a text. But we have to put it in perspective. In perspective, it was a personal device sent to one individual. It was not a public statement. If it had been a public statement, I might have been looking at it from a different perspective, but it wasn't. So I have to say why. So all of us can look back at 4 years and point out something that we could have done better, that had it been made public, we wouldn't have been happy with. But we've dealt with this. A penalty doesn't mean now we can move on. Because if you listen in the criminal system, where people think because they go to jail that all of a sudden the healing process starts, no, that has nothing to do with the healing process. The healing process starts with acknowledging the issue and moving on. It does not lessen what happened. It's too bad that it wasn't handled in a better way. It could have been. But I totally disagree, and that's why I put my light on, is that you have to throw a penalty in order to start to heal? Absolutely not. You have to acknowledge the issue, the problem, and then you can start to heal. The penalty does not start that process. Thank you.
Councillor Sprovieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now I know why I get along with my neighbor here. We think alike. Along the same lines, Mr. Chairman, criminals are put in jail to hopefully rehabilitate them and put them back in society and be productive. A lot of them do get rehabilitated. A lot of them actually get worse. They come out and they're worse. Sometimes the penalty does not really achieve the goal. In my judgment, given Councillor Pedler's this mediocre penalty, I don't know whether it's just the penalty that's been recommended is to me it's not it's a black mark on the character of a person if it's given. But I don't believe it, as we heard from Councillor Cullerson, I don't believe Councillor Parrish is a bad person and deserves to be penalized. I don't believe that this penalty will make her to rehabilitate her. I believe that she's already an outstanding human being, and all the work that she's done and for her community. So giving her this penalty, I understand why penalties are given, and basically to teach people a lesson and to make sure it doesn't happen again. But I'm sure Councillor Parrish has learned her lesson, and she knows it was a wrong thing to say, and I think we've all learned from this. I don't believe it. We've had we actually at council, because of what happened at Brampton, we did have a sensitivity training session, and was it useful? Well, I think that this experience, we talking about it, is a lot more useful and a lot more productive than actually 2 hours of rambling that I can't remember a word that was said. I got the gist of it, and but I think we've all learned from this experience here that what's right and what should be said and what shouldn't be said, and to control our tempers and to be more diplomatic as politicians and so on. So I have to say that, given her, I'm sure it's not going to hurt her pocketbook to give her this few days of penalty, but I don't believe that that's going to achieve. It's going to be really achieve any. It's not going to make it better. Let's put it that way. I don't believe it's going to make her a better person. She's already a good person. She's already a better person. So just giving her this penalty is not going to make it any better. So I don't believe it. I think, as I said before, we all deserve a second chance and move on. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Miles.
Could you call the question, Mr. Chairman, please?
He's switched.
He's allowed to speak if he hasn't.
Okay, then. Okay. I have to call the vote then to call the question.
Okay.
All those in favor? Calling the question. No, this took, yeah. Okay, and the motion is one of receipt. It was moved by Councillor Sato, I believe, and seconded by Councillor Cook, and a recorded vote was requested.
Point, which it can't be, no, it's not a tie because Councillor Parrish actually didn't vote. But she pushed the button. Can we clear it and start over? Just clear it and start over.
In the old days,
That's
we used to
easier.
stand up.
The motion's defeated. So the second motion then was the recommendation of the Integrity Commissioner. I don't know if you want to put that up, or does everybody take it as read, or do you want it up? I don't. Okay. So that's the recommendations from the Integrity Commissioner, which is, I can read them. That the remuneration paid to Carolyn Parish as a member of Peel Regional Council be suspended for a period of 5 days, and that the Peel Regional Council engage a qualified person to provide sensitivity training to Councillor Parish, and at their option, other members of Peel Regional Council, which training at minimum includes the subjects of sex and race-based biases.
Yes, and at their option, it's
It says it,
included.
it says at their option.
And other members, okay.
Yeah.
I think we all should do it as an
We should all do it.
Okay. Mayor Jeffrey? Okay.
We all
Rec-
do it.
Recorded vote is required.
Oops.
The motion passes. Mayor Thompson, would you move receipt of 16-2? That was Councillor Parrish's Lord, and seconded by Councillor Cook. All in favor? That's receipt of the response from Carolyn Parrish's solicitor. All in favor? Carried. I don't know if there's going to be, are we going to go into camera? Is there questions on the in-camera?
Councillor Shaughnessy's notice of motion.
No, I know, but before we go into the notice, are we going to, is there any questions on any of the in-camera? No, I'm not there yet. I'm just, the only reason I'm asking, otherwise we'll go for lunch. If there isn't any, then let's continue on. So the next order of business would be Councillor Shaughnessy under notice of motion. I believe you wanted to file a notice of motion.
Sorry. Thank you very much. Yes, having to do with staff and the permits. What happens right now is the permitting process, whether it's for using your roads for car commercials or for cycling or whatever, we don't get notice of that soon enough. We get it of the day of, so we aren't able to provide comment. So I'm asking that staff go back and review the process having to do with handing out permits and whether it even fits in with our Vision Zero. A lot of issues happen in my ward having to do with automobiles racing through the Turnpike, which is a regional road. And I think we just need to go and look and make sure that those processes that we have for all the permitting actually don't run contrary to Vision Zero and some of the other policies. So I'm hoping that staff can come back with a report in September. That would be great. Thank you.
Duly noted. We don't need a motion on that, right? Okay. That moves us to in camera. Oh, bylaws first, yeah. Okay. Skip that. have a motion then moved by Councillor Mahoney. Oops, sorry. I have a motion moved by Councillor Mahoney, seconded by Councillor Kovac, that the bylaws listed on Regional Council agenda, being bylaws 40-2018 to 46-2018 inclusive, be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the regional clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Now, be in camera. Motion moved by Councillor Miles, seconded by Councillor Moore, that the June 28th Regional Council closed session report be received, and further that the recommendations contained within the confidential reports relating to items 19.2 to 19.10 inclusive and bylaw 47-2018 listed on the July 12th, 2018 Regional Council agenda be approved and become public upon adoption, and further that the direction given in camera to the Commissioner of Public Works and Regional Solicitor relating to item 19.11 listed on the July 12th, 2018 Regional Council agenda be approved. And that's recorded, right? Yeah. And recorded vote required on the in-camera matters. And that passes. Motion moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Groves, that bylaw 42-2018 to confirm the proceedings of Regional Council at its meeting held on July 12, 2018, and to authorize the execution of documents in accordance with the Region Appeal bylaws related thereto, be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the regional clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Carlson, seconded by Councillor Fonseca. All in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you. See you in September. I think there was a song about that. There was a song about that.